Chapter 81. The Morning Prophet often filled the occupants of Seren with rage, but this edition had Sirius swearing before he even turned the first page. The front page story reported that a transport of prisoners heading to Azkaban had been attacked, allowing the prisoners, all convicted Death Eaters, to break free. Miraculously, both auras involved emerged entirely unharmed. "Scrimgeour is going to be the death of us all, that incompetent fool," Snape muttered, glaring daggers at the newspaper. Harry reached for it, eager to see just how badly the Ministry had messed up this time. Their new minister seemed far more concerned with creating a facade of action than addressing the many issues within the Ministry itself, which meant incidents like this would continue to occur. "At least they've finally admitted they don't have control over the Dementors," Harry pointed out, gesturing to a section on the third page that responded to the calls for harsher punishments, demanding that all confirmed Death Eaters be kissed immediately. It was a small admission, buried in a much larger paragraph, arguing that the kiss was too drastic, citing Sirius as an example of how it could go wrong, as if he had even received a trial the first time around. But there it was. Azkaban prison no longer served as the home for the Dementors, and their use in guarding prisoners had ceased to be Ministry protocol. It seemed as if they had simply decided against it, rather than acknowledging that all the Dementors had fled to join Voldemort. "Well, they had to after all the attacks further north," Remus reasoned. "They'd rather admit they've lost the Dementors than pretend they haven't and take responsibility for that whole village that got kissed." Harry shuddered at the reminder. That had been a truly horrific attack to read about. Not for the first time, he wondered if there would be anything left of Wizarding Britain by the time he turned 17. So much had already happened since Voldemort's return. Gone public. What if he couldn't afford to wait? "I know what you're thinking, and stop it," Draco muttered, nudging his knee against Harry's. "You're not responsible for any of this." "But I know how to stop him." "So does Dumbledore, and he sure as hell isn't hurrying up with it. Besides, there are still potentially 3 more Horcruxes we don't know about." Draco leaned in and kissed him, giving him a sharp look. "Stop beating yourself up about this." Harry huffed in response. "Stop being right all the time." A cocky smirk crossed Draco's lips. "Shan't," he replied, turning back to his breakfast, both of them ignoring the amused looks on the adults' faces. They were due to practice apparating again with Sirius, who thankfully seemed in much better spirits than the day before. After breakfast, the 3 of them headed out to their usual spot in the woods. Both Harry and Draco had managed to apparate at least once, with their circles so close together. Today, Sirius was going to move them a little further apart. Harry just hoped his godfather was right about it getting easier after the first time. By lunchtime, they had successfully apparated 3 more times each, without anyone getting splinched. Sirius promised to start them on destinations they couldn't see next time they practiced. Riding high on their success, Harry returned to the house, and Remus floated a letter his way as he walked into the kitchen. "This came for you about half an hour ago," Remus said. Harry frowned, tearing the envelope open. "It's from Cassius." Draco appeared at his shoulder, concern etched on his face as he leaned in to read the letter as well. "Dear Harry, I'm sure you've seen the paper. I don't know if your friend Tonks told you, but my uncle and cousin were 2 of the Death Eaters convicted in the group that escaped. My other cousin died in the attack. I'm the last eligible heir to the Warrington seat. There's a Wizengamot meeting I'm going to claim my seat next week. If I do that, they can't take it away from me, no matter what happens. The problem is, I'm not nearly as politically powerful as Lady Malfoy, so I worry about the consequences. That won't stop me, but I might need some sanctuary. I'll do my best to convince the Dark Lord that I align with his views, though I plan to avoid the mark for as long as possible. With any luck, I can toe the line, but honestly, I don't expect it to last long. I just wanted to prepare you, and if you happen to have one of those handy visions of yours in time to tell me to run, I would really appreciate a warning. See you soon, but hopefully not too soon. Cassius. P.S. Oliver sends his love and says to hurry up and end the war so he can have the Quidditch pitch wedding of his dreams. I asked him, and he said yes. Harry couldn't help but grin by the end of the letter, even though the rest of it was a bit alarming. Sirius? Narcissa? He began, looking up at the pair. You two are going to be at the Wizengamot meeting next week, right? We were certainly planning on it, Narcissa confirmed. Is there a reason we shouldn't? No, actually a reason you should. Cassius Warrington is going to take his seat. Apparently his uncle and cousin are two of the Azkaban escapees from this morning. He's taking his chance while he can, but if Voldemort comes after him expecting him to be marked and fall in line, he'll need a place to take cover. The two Wizengamot members exchanged a grim look. We'll slip him a portkey once he's confirmed his seat, Sirius assured. Let him know who his allies are. Thank you. With any luck, that would keep both Cassius and Oliver safe. He turned back to Draco, offering a slight smile. Will you be my date to their wedding, whenever it is? Looks like the end of the line for that one, Draco said, eyeing Harry with a sparkle in his eyes. I suppose I can stand to be seen with you, he added, which made Sirius snort in amusement. He doesn't clean up too badly, Sirius defended. It's a shame there's not much to be done about that hair of his. Even Sleek Easy's doesn't work. Best thing old Monty ever invented, and it still can't tame the famous Potter mop. He ruffled Harry's hair playfully and raised an eyebrow. A mop that really could use a trim, if I'm honest. Ginny usually takes care of it before school lets out, Harry replied, running a hand through his messy locks. With everything that happened, I forgot to ask her this time. Mooney'll cut it, Sirius offered. He used to do Prongsy's hair, and it never turned out too badly. One of these days I'll get you to a proper hairdresser, Draco declared, a hint of authority in his tone. Just then, Remus and Snape walked through the door. Remus raised an eyebrow at Draco. You do that and they'll weep, he warned. We never found one brave enough to tackle James's hair. Is it part of the family magic? Harry asked, slightly astonished that his hair had such a notorious reputation. Aunt Petunia had always just cut it as short as she dared, while still keeping his scar covered, no matter how strange or unkempt it looked. We were never really sure if it was magic or just a weird genetic quirk, Sirius mused as he sat down for lunch. Once, James tried to see if growing it out would help, but that just made it worse. He broke 3 hairbrushes in a month trying that. It will be very interesting to see which genetics come out on top, Narcissa remarked, eyeing Harry and Draco thoughtfully. Every Malfoy since Henry VIII has been as blonde as a Vila. The boys exchanged glances, both blushing deeply at the implication. Mother, Draco protested, his embarrassment evident. Narcissa just laughed, gently stroking her son's hair. Harry stared down at his lunch, his cheeks bright red. When he thought no one was looking, he glanced up at Draco's pale hair, curious about how their genetics would mix. One day, he thought. Harry was excited for their visitors the next day. Tonks had sent word that she would be bringing Kingsley with her, which sent Narcissa running straight to visit Andy, despite Tonks specifically saying not to make a big deal out of it. Both Tonks and Kingsley had promised to duel Harry and see how he fared. Snape, however, insisted that this was no excuse to slack off while waiting for them to arrive. He couldn't very well do so without revealing his presence to the two aurors, so Harry and Draco were both being put through their paces by Remus when the pair finally entered the large room they had turned into their training space. "Watch her, Harry," Tonks greeted, waving cheerfully. Kingsley stood beside her, raising an eyebrow at the sight of Draco. "Mr. Malfoy, I didn't realize you were part of this too," he remarked. Draco shrugged, holstering his wand. "Someone has to keep this idiot out of trouble," he said, grinning at Harry. "I'm a lot newer to it than Harry, though," Draco added. "Maybe the two of us can duel you both later," Harry suggested, refusing to let Draco put himself down. He knew Draco was far better than he gave himself credit for. Tonks lit up at the idea. "Oh, that'd be brilliant," she exclaimed. "Remus, do you mind—" Kingsley trailed off, and Remus shook his head, smiling. "No, not at all. These two are all yours. I'll be in the library if you need me." He shrugged his cardigan back on. "Have fun, all of you. Remember, no spells you can't reverse." That last part was mostly directed at Harry and Draco. Once Remus had left, Kingsley eyed them with a bemused expression. "I sense a story behind this." "That warning," Harry said with a sheepish shrug. "We've had a few close calls over the last couple of years." He recalled the bone-melting curse he had sent off just the other week, one that would have landed anyone else in St. Mungo's, but thankfully it had been Snape. No permanent harm had been done, and Harry had learned a valuable lesson. He rolled up his sleeves and shot a challenging grin at the two auras. "Right then, who's up first?" Dueling with two fully qualified active service auras was difficult. Harry would be the first to admit he hadn't expected much of a challenge from Tonks, considering how clumsy she could be in her day-to-day life. But as soon as the fight began, she transformed into a completely different person, though not literally, despite her ability to do so. Harry had been trained by Severus Snape himself, and he felt much more comfortable taking dirty shots than the auras did. It paid off 8 minutes into the duel with Tonks when he managed to freeze the ground beneath her feet just long enough to throw her slightly off balance, catching her with a stunner to the thigh. Kingsley had a cushioning charm ready a split second before she hit the ground, and he walked over to revive his partner. "He got me," Tonks grumbled as she accepted Kingsley's hand up. Kingsley nodded. He did. Then he turned to Harry, clearly impressed. "You are not what I expected." Harry laughed. "I get that a lot. Are you all right, Tonks?" "Oh, yeah, I'm fine." The aura waved him off. "Bloody hell, kid, you've got an arm on you. You sure you want to go into pro Quidditch?" "Professor McGonagall says the aura department has more rules than I'm capable of following," Harry replied cheerfully, hearing Draco snicker in the background. "Besides, I think once the war is over, I'll be done with fighting criminals." "That's a shame. You're better than our trainees," Kingsley remarked, "though honestly, that's not too difficult at the moment, considering the standards," he said with a grimace. Harry mirrored the expression. He could only imagine what he meant. "If it helps, a lot of Hogwarts students have trained with me," Harry added, gesturing vaguely to indicate the duel he'd just had. "Not quite at that level, but they're good in a fight. Hopefully the aura ranks will swell in the next few years with some decent recruits." Yet, he had to admit, he wasn't sure how many of the Hogwarts alumni would trust the ministry enough to apply. In the corner, Tonks snorted. "Tell them to wait until Proudfoot's been kicked out. He's an arse, and he hates anyone more competent than he is." Which is a pretty low bar, honestly. A faint smirk flickered across Kingsley's lips, and his silence was as good as agreement. With the first duel behind him, Harry faced off against Kingsley. That was a much tougher fight, and he ultimately lost, but only after 18 minutes of intense dueling. "More than most people get against kings," Tonks complimented, patting her partner's bicep. Having seen how they duelled against Harry, Draco was hesitant to step up, but with a little encouragement and a whispered promise that made the blonde flush faintly, Harry convinced him to duel Tonks, while Kingsley shared some tips with him. "I had no idea Sirius and Remus were such ruthless duellists," Kingsley remarked, as they discussed some of the more morally dubious moves Harry had made. Harry suppressed a smile, imagining what Kingsley might say if he knew who his main instructor really was. "Sirius was raised to black," he pointed out instead. "Use any advantage you can." That wasn't entirely untrue. Harry's ruthlessness hadn't all come from Snape. Sirius and Remus were marauders, and it showed when they got serious about dueling. When it came to dueling in pairs, things really intensified. Harry and Draco had trained extensively together, but they had never faced opponents who were equally experienced in dueling as a team. Their encounters with Sirius and Remus came close, but the 12-year age gap between them had significantly altered the older duo's fighting style. Tonks and Kingsley, on the other hand, worked side by side, lived together, and knew each other inside and out. Their synergy was evident in their fluid fighting style, something Harry and Draco could only aspire to achieve. The training session was incredibly beneficial, and Harry felt a twinge of disappointment when a sudden chirping sound emerged from within Kingsley's robe. Tonks cursed under her breath, while the bald man frowned and retrieved what appeared to be a pocket watch, which was flashing bright red. "Duty calls," he sighed. "Good work today, boys. I'd be happy to come back and train with you again, work permitting." He turned to Tonks and kissed her gently. "I'm sorry, Tonks. We'll have to postpone our dinner plans. I'll see you at home." "Be safe," she replied. "If it's Proudfoot messing things up again, do me a favor and hex him." A flicker of a smile crossed Kingsley's face before he strode out of the room, leaving the three of them behind. Once he was gone, Tonks let out a long sigh. "I swear to Helga, if he's gone all evening because of something stupid that the in-office auras could have handled, I'm going to blow up the whole ministry." "I thought the on-call auras were only for emergencies," Harry asked cautiously. "You would think so," Tonks agreed, huffing in frustration. "But we've both had all sorts of ridiculous calls lately. It's worse than when Fudge was in charge. At least then it was genuine incompetence. Now it's just dark supporters within the ministry accidentally letting things go wrong." She scowled, the tips of her hair turning a vibrant red. "Sometimes I think they've figured the two of us out. This only ever seems to happen on our shifts." "Those times we have the whole day off together," Tonks said, a hint of nostalgia in her voice. "Will it be bad if you get caught?" Draco asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "Depends," Tonks replied with a shrug. "Technically, they could fire both of us if they wanted to. If they're trying to push out light-sided auras, that could definitely happen. The best-case scenario? A slap on the wrist and maybe a suspension, along with a warning not to bring personal drama into the workplace. Ideally, we'll keep it under wraps until it's no longer an issue." A secretive smile crossed her face, and Harry and Draco exchanged a curious glance. What were those two plotting? "Well," Draco said after a moment, glancing at his watch, "we were about due to wrap things up anyway. I have some potions I wanted to brew. Are you staying for lunch, cousin?" "I won't turn down a free meal," Tonks chirped cheerfully, "especially now that I've got nothing to go home to for a while." Draco nodded and pulled Harry in for a brief kiss. "Don't blow up the basement," Harry teased, earning a playful glare from his boyfriend before Draco headed out. Harry turned to Tonks with a shrug. "We've got about an hour until lunch. Would you mind going over that rope-tripping move you used? I've never seen it before." Of course, yeah, she grinned. It's something my dad taught me, actually. Super useful in a fight. With enthusiasm, she launched into a demonstration, and Harry focused intently. After a while, he finally gathered the courage to ask a question that had been on his mind. "Hey, Tonks," he began, and she raised an expectant eyebrow. "Can I ask, why doesn't Kingsley call you by your name? You know, since you two are together and everything." She blinked, looking perplexed. "He does?" "No, I mean like your first name or anything," Harry clarified. "Draco calls me Potter sometimes, but it's not really the same thing. He and Draco often use surnames as a form of familiarity. It's just a term of endearment by now, after so much time spent only being able to use them in public," Tonks said, frowning. Harry wondered if he had misstepped. "I'm sorry, it's none of my business. No, you're fine," she assured him. "It's just not always an easy one to explain. She sighed deeply. "My first name, I hate it," she admitted. "It's not just that it's old-fashioned and a bit of a mouthful. For a while at school, I tried shortening it to Dora, but it's such a girl's name, you know?" Harry blinked, trying to understand where she was coming from. "But you're only a boy sometimes, right? Does having a girl's name bother you even when you are a girl?" Had he misunderstood the whole situation? Was he using the wrong pronouns, even now? "I'm only a boy sometimes," Tonks agreed. "But even when I look like a girl, I don't always feel like one, you know? It's like something in between. Not quite one or the other." She huffed in frustration, running a hand through her hair. "I'll be honest with you, Harry. I can hardly explain it myself, let alone to anyone else, but Tonks is a name that feels like me, no matter how I'm feeling gender-wise, you know? There might be days when I don't mind being called Dora, though I will always hate the full name. I really don't know what Mum was thinking," she added, giving Harry a look that made him grin. "But Tonks is just me. So yeah, it might sound weird when my boyfriend calls me by my last name, like we're just aura partners and nothing else, but it fits." She grinned playfully. "Sometimes I like to think it's like I'm one of those muggle pop stars, like Cher or Prince or Madonna." Harry snickered. "You could bring the trend into the magical world." "Right?" she agreed enthusiastically. "Clearly I missed my calling as the next greatest magical pop star. Weird sisters eat your hearts out." She winked and reached out to ruffle Harry's hair. "Anyway, I like to pretend my first name doesn't exist, and Kings is happy to do the same." Suddenly her gaze turned teasing. "Or were you thinking about what he calls me when we're alone?" She wiggled her eyebrows playfully. Harry blushed furiously and shook his head. "No," he spluttered, causing her to laugh. It seemed a bit—" He hesitated, not wanting to say weird, but the look on Tonks' face made it clear he didn't need to. She wasn't offended, and her smile softened. "Not everyone needs pet names to know they're loved," she pointed out. "Him calling me by the name I choose is way better than any nickname either of us could think of anyway." Her pale green eyes shone with adoration for a moment before she shook her head, blushing. "Merlin, listen to me. I sound like a besotted little third year." Harry smirked at her. "Well, you did invite him here," he began, yelping and ducking when Tonks sent a stinging hex his way. "We are not making a big deal out of that," she said pointedly, glaring even as her blush deepened. "Besides, it's Sirius and Charlie you should be teasing about that, moving the bloke in here after just 2 months together." Harry groaned, shaking his head. "Merlin, have you seen them, though? They're disgustingly happy together, and I thought Draco and I were bad." Sirius and Charlie were the polar opposites of Remus and Snape, and having the two couples living under the same roof was wildly jarring at times. "I've seen Charlie obsessed with boyfriends in the past, but it's never been like this," Tonks agreed, shaking her head fondly. "They're meant to be, I suppose." Harry nodded vigorously. If ever there was an example of true love forming quickly, it was those two. "I'm just glad Sirius has someone. He was alone for so long." At the end of Harry's third year, Sirius was practically a different person. Even compared to how he had been in the weeks leading up to Charlie's return from Romania, the change was striking. "Yeah, takes the fun out of teasing them a bit, doesn't it?" Tonks said, feigning annoyance. "He's had so much trouble. He deserves good things, even if watching them together does make me a little nauseous." Harry laughed, fully agreeing with her on both counts. Finally, the day had arrived. OWL results. Both boys were surprised when the results were delivered during breakfast, too caught up in a debate about the plot of a Muggle book Harry had made Draco read. They didn't even notice the envelopes until Narcissa plucked two identical ones from the pile of mail Kerry had brought in. "Well, I've been waiting for these to arrive," she said, her voice cutting through their argument. She held out one envelope to each of them, and Harry's heart sank as he caught sight of the ministry seal. Suddenly all eyes were on them. Even Snape was watching intently, though his expression revealed nothing. Harry turned to Draco, who looked equally anxious. "Best just get it over with then, yeah?" he suggested, ever the Gryffindor. Draco nodded jerkily, and together they opened their envelopes. Silence fell over the kitchen as they read. Harry stared at the parchment, his mind racing as the letters struggled to form coherent words through the panic. As he skimmed over the results, his brain short-circuited for an entirely different reason. Ordinary Wizarding Levels results. Harry James Potter has achieved. Astronomy, E. Care of Magical Creatures, O. Charms, O. Defense against the Dark Arts, O. Divination, E. Herbology, O. Arithmancy, O. History of Magic, A. Ancient Runes, O. Potions, O. Transfiguration, O. Mr. Potter is to be congratulated for achieving the highest DADA grade since 1904. "Well?" Sirius pressed eagerly, practically leaning over the table. "How did you do?" I got an O in potions," Harry stuttered, surprised by his own words. That was, to him, the most unexpected grade of all. He looked up at Snape, wide-eyed. "I got an O in potions." No matter how many times he said it, it still sounded utterly ridiculous. Snape's lips curved into a smile, and even Harry could see the pride shining in those dark eyes. "Nothing less than I expected," he replied. A flood of warmth filled Harry's chest at those words, taking him by surprise. Had he really been so worried about letting Snape down? Yes, he realized, he had. Snape had put so much effort into working with him over the summers, despite their rocky start. He was a hard man to please, and Harry felt like a puppy who had just received a treat for doing a good job. He grinned so widely that his face hurt. "You are never allowed to call me a nerd again," Draco declared, making Harry realize the blonde was leaning over his shoulder to peek at his results. Grey eyes glittered, and Draco pressed his lips to Harry's cheek. "Not bad, Potter." The words were spoken so fondly that the warm feeling inside Harry grew impossibly bigger. "How did you do?" Draco held out his own parchment for Harry to read, just as Sirius lost patience entirely and snatched Harry's results from his hand. Ignoring Sirius, Harry leaned slightly against Draco as he read aloud. Draconis Lucius Malfoy has achieved astronomy, O, care of magical creatures, E, charms, O, defense against the dark arts, O, herbology, E, history of magic, O, ancient runes, O, potions, O, transfiguration, E. Harry looked up at him, beaming, and hugged him tightly around the shoulders. "Draco, that's brilliant. Well done." "I would have liked to do better in transfiguration," the Slytherin said, frowning slightly. "But I knew I didn't." "Fully managing the transfiguration from animate to inanimate isn't really a surprise," Draco said, letting his mother take the results. Harry planted a kiss on the corner of his mouth as they both watched the adults react. Sirius was beaming widely, with Charlie resting his chin on Sirius's shoulder to read along, while Remus leaned in for a closer look. Narcissa and Snape bent their heads together over Draco's results, and when they looked up, approval was clear on their faces. "Well done, darling," Narcissa said, reaching out to squeeze Draco's hand. "Wonderful results." "You have done yourself proud, Draco," Snape agreed. Harry noticed how Draco's shoulders straightened at those words, delight shining on his face. All he had ever wanted was to make Severus Snape proud of him. "Sounds like you're both nerds to me," Sirius declared playfully. "Oi, Snape, trade you." He held out Harry's results, his other hand reaching expectantly for Draco's. Snape obliged, and then Narcissa turned her warm smile toward Harry. "Congratulations, Harry dear. You should be very pleased." "I am," he assured her, nodding enthusiastically. "Merlin, I can't believe I got an E in divination." He definitely owed Parvati and Lavender something nice for their help. "Shame about history of magic," Charlie said, "but I guess you did sort of get a vision in the middle and everything." Harry snorted, thinking about how he was just glad to have passed that one under the circumstances. "And I suppose I can let the astronomy grade slide," Sirius added with mock dismay, since there was a bit of an interruption, although Draco still managed to uphold the Black family pride. He was clearly teasing, and Harry laughed. "Well done, both of you," Remus said, smiling with bright amber eyes. "We'll have to do something to celebrate. Certainly cake for dinner." "You just want cake," Sirius teased, elbowing his friend. "You boys mind if I keep these for a bit? Sissa and I are having lunch with Andy after our Wizengamot meeting. It's only fair if we do a bit of bragging." Harry didn't mind at all. He knew he wouldn't be forgetting those grades any time soon. "Should we write and see what the others got, or just wait until my birthday?" he asked, looking at Draco. His birthday was just over a week away, and he expected to see most of his friends then. "Well, I'm writing to the girls," Draco replied, "but I'm going to wait on the rest." "I should tell Parvati and Lavender that their efforts weren't wasted," Harry mused, still in shock over his divination result. "Go on, boys, go write to your friends," Sirius encouraged, "and take the day off training too. You've earned it." Harry couldn't argue with that. He was far too happy to even think about dueling. Suddenly Draco snorted. "I bet you've done better than Granger," he said, a teasing glint in his eyes. Harry stared at him. "Maybe in a couple of subjects, but overall, I doubt it." He couldn't imagine Hermione getting anything less than an E. In fact, he wouldn't be surprised if she had straight O's. You might not have noticed because you were busy doing 1,000 things at once, but Granger spent half of last year paying more attention to what you were doing than her own work, Draco informed him, clearly entertained. "And you did one more subject than her, thanks to your 2 self-studies. I can only speak for runes, but she spent most of that exam trying to glare at you without getting caught. Between that and how much you improved through the HA, it wouldn't surprise me if you've beaten her. History of magic doesn't count," he dismissed with a wave of his hand. Harry shook his head, feeling a mix of disbelief and excitement. "We'll see when school starts back, I suppose." The thought of academically outperforming Hermione Granger was, well, incredibly satisfying to say the least. Sirius still felt strange walking into... As Sirius stepped into the Wizengamot chambers, his robes shifted seamlessly into the official garb the moment he crossed the threshold. It still felt strange to be at the ministry. People regarded him as if he was some sort of criminal, but he was beginning to adjust to that perception. Having Charlie by his side helped ease the discomfort. The redhead leaned in and kissed Sirius on the cheek before they all split up to take their assigned seats. Sirius couldn't help but notice the wave of whispers that followed the affectionate gesture. He smirked to himself, thinking, "Let them gossip." He had nothing to be ashamed of. If anyone's reputation was at stake, it was Charlie's, and the dragon tamer had assured him time and again that he couldn't care less about that. Settling into the Black family seat, Sirius propped his ankle on his knee and waited for the meeting to begin. "We have a new member joining us today," Scrimger announced once everyone was present and quiet, his expression betraying a hint of displeasure. Sirius sat up a little straighter. Of course, the Warrington boy was claiming his seat, as Harry had mentioned. The door swung open, and Cassius Warrington strode in, the tension in his jaw revealing his anxiety. Sirius easily recognized the family resemblance. Julius Warrington, Cassius's father, had graduated from Hogwarts the year Sirius had started, and their families moved in the same social circles. "I, Cassius Julius Warrington, have come to claim the Warrington seat of my birthright," the 18-year-old declared firmly. Sirius noticed several people exchanging glances, likely curious that Cassius hadn't mentioned doing so with his uncle's permission. As if he would even admit such a thing when his uncle was a wanted fugitive. The Warrington seat glowed in approval, and Cassius's robes transformed, the family ring appearing on his hand. Sirius observed how the tension in Cassius's shoulders eased ever so slightly. It was the same way Harry's had when the Wizengamot chamber had accepted him. Sirius took his seat as a proxy, feeling a sense of relief knowing his future was in safe hands, Cassius's hands to be precise. "Welcome, Lord Warrington," Scrimger sneered, his contempt evident. Sirius scowled. They deserved better than a minister who judged people by their family name rather than their character. "Please take your seat." The Warrington seat was only a few down from the Black seat. As the young lord passed in front of Sirius, the animagus cleared his throat, bending as if to pick something off the floor. "Excuse me, Lord Warrington, I believe you dropped this." Cassius looked confused, but that expression quickly faded as Sirius discreetly handed him a folded piece of parchment with a small lump inside, a ring. Their eyes met, and Sirius gave the barest nod. The portkey would take him to safety if he ever needed it. "Thank you, Lord Black," the Slytherin murmured as he continued on his way. Sirius let his gaze drift to Narcissa, who offered him the tiniest hint of a smile in response. Scrimger began the meeting, and Sirius did his best not to doze off through the whole affair. Most of it was just unnecessary chatter, whether it was the minister or Dumbledore taking the floor. Nothing useful was being suggested. Everyone was too afraid to upset the balance, given all the outside forces at play. With Sirius and Narcissa shifting the power dynamics, no one was quite sure how voting would fall on certain matters. The dark no longer had the confidence of maintaining the Malfoy bloc, while the light was fractured between those who supported Dumbledore and those who did not. Just as things began to wind down, Narcissa raised her wand, startling the gathering. "Lady Malfoy, you have the floor." Scrimgeour was clearly reluctant to yield, but rules were rules. Narcissa smiled, gracefully rising to her feet. "Thank you," she began. "Minister," Narcissa began, turning to face the gathered Wizengamot, who regarded her with varying degrees of apprehension. "I would like to announce that I will soon be placing a declaration in the Daily Prophet, promising to personally fund anyone wishing to undergo an inheritance test at Gringotts Bank." Sirius's eyes widened in surprise. She hadn't mentioned this to him. "That is highly unorthodox, Lady Malfoy," Lord Parkinson growled, causing Narcissa's sweet smile to sharpen at the edges. "Unorthodox, yes, but not illegal," she replied, her tone steady. "I'm sure we can all agree it is unseemly for one person to hold such a large number of proxy seats in this governing body." Her gaze innocently drifted toward Dumbledore as she spoke. "I would very much like to return the guardianship of my houses to their rightful lines, to properly fill some of these grand seats once more. However, due to the events of the last several decades, I find myself lacking viable heirs. We know they exist. The Chamber has not declared the lines extinct. I encourage those who may not have considered their lineage to do so, with the hope that I won't have to pass such an extraordinarily large burden on to my son, Draco." She let out a soft, demure laugh. "I believe there are far better gifts for a 17th birthday." "I stand with Lady Malfoy," Sirius declared, rising to his feet before he fully processed his own words. "And I am happy to offer coin from the Black Vaults for this endeavour, should you be willing to accept." Gasps of shock rippled through the room, but Narcissa nodded in gratitude. Scrimgeour banged his gavel, calling for silence as the noise swelled. "Enough! Thank you, Lady Malfoy," he said flatly, "for your generous offer. Now, does anyone have any matters of relevance to discuss?" "Discuss?" Sirius asked, settling back into his seat with a smirk. Across the room, Dumbledore wore a look that suggested he had just caught a whiff of something unpleasant. It served him right. Remus turned the page of his book, though, if he was being honest, he hadn't really been focused for the last 10 minutes. A yawn escaped him, and he cracked his jaw. Perhaps it was time to try and sleep. Beside him, Severus remained upright, engrossed in a potions journal. Remus slid his bookmark into place, set his book on the nightstand, and shuffled closer to his partner. Severus's lips twitched, and he raised one arm, silently inviting Remus to cuddle up against him while he read. The familiar scent of potion ingredients and sandalwood enveloped Remus, relaxing him far more effectively than any balm or candle could. Severus's free hand rested gently on his shoulder, and Remus let his eyes fall to half-mast, content to doze until Severus was ready to turn off the light and settle in for the night. "Remus." The quiet voice startled him. Severus sounded unusually serious. Remus tilted his head up, trying to shake off the sleepy haze. "Hmm?" Severus's mouth tightened slightly, a sure sign of his discomfort. Remus straightened up. "What's the matter, love?" Potter may be Black's godson, but it has become increasingly clear to me that your relationship with the boy is equally paternal." His words were careful, as if he was choosing them with great thought. Remus froze. Was Severus finally going to address the elephant in the room? the one that had been looming since the night they brought the pensive back from the Potter vault, when Severus had revealed which memory he intended to show Harry. To celebrate the boys' exam results, they had taken another trip down memory lane that evening. Perhaps revisiting the past was making Severus increasingly aware of the brighter moments they had shared back then. The plans they had made, which may... Severus began to struggle with his next words, and Remus, sensing his discomfort, gently set aside the potions journal. He took both of Severus's hands in his own. "Severus," Remus began, carefully choosing his words. He didn't want to frighten him off, especially not on this topic. "It's true, Harry has become like a son to me, and I won't deny it's made me think about some things." Severus tensed at the admission, but Remus pressed on. "I know back during the First War, before everything went wrong, we talked about it." They had only shared those conversations a handful of times, in the safety of their bedroom, where the outside world faded away. "I remember you were convinced it wasn't possible, that it wasn't advisable for you. But Sev, seeing you with Harry and Draco makes me even more certain that you would be an incredible father." He offered an earnest smile, squeezing Severus's hands gently. Panic flickered in those dark eyes that Remus cherished. Both those boys are teenagers. I'm not solely responsible for either one of them," Severus protested stiffly. Remus chuckled lightly. "I should hope you wouldn't be solely responsible for any children we might have either." He noticed Severus tense further. "I'm not worried about passing on my genes, not like I was when we were young. Especially not with recent research. There weren't many studies on lycanthropy, but with the increasing number of infected individuals due to Greyback's actions during the First War, new discoveries were being made. It turned out that a werewolf having a child with a non-werewolf was unlikely to result in a full werewolf child unless the werewolf was the one carrying it. The child might exhibit some wolf-like tendencies and sensitivities, but they were unlikely to change with the phases of the moon. And even if they did, Remus no longer saw it as a burden. The horrifying curse it once was no longer plagued him. Now he was at peace with his wolf side. Dumbledore's spells had long since left his body. "I was never worried about your genes," Severus remarked. "It's my own that concern me far more, and my actions even more so." Remus sighed and reached up to cup Severus's face tenderly. "How do you still not see what an incredible man you are?" he breathed, his heart aching. "Severus, you risk your life every day so that others can be safe. You may be reserved with your emotions, but they are certainly there. And as I said before, seeing you with the boys, I know you would be wonderful with children." Near black eyes shuttered with grief. "My father." Remus cut him off with a kiss. "Your father was a bastard, and you are nothing like him," he insisted, his voice firm. "You need to stop carrying his sins as if they were your own. Do you think I would ever let you do anything he did, to myself or to our child? Do you think you would ever allow yourself to stoop to such a thing?" The very fact that Severus worried about this was one of the reasons Remus believed he would make a fine father. But he could see the urge to retreat growing in Severus's eyes, so he smiled slightly and kissed him again. "We don't need to decide anything right now," he assured him. "It's hardly the best time for it, and it would likely take a while to find someone willing to carry for us." They no longer had Lily. "But so many things we thought would be denied to us have fallen into our laps, Severus. Let's not rule anything out, okay? The future is full of possibilities." He grinned playfully. "I'm sure Sirius and Charlie will beat us to the punch anyway. We can see how we do with their babies before we attempt to create any of our own." Severus narrowed his eyes. "As if a child of the two of us would be anything like the spawn of those two fools," he shot back. Remus chuckled. "Don't pretend you weren't a mischievous little sod as a kid. You just hid it better." He smoothed a hand down the front of Severus's t-shirt. "It's something to think about, isn't it?" It was a dream he entertained in bold moments, the two of them as parents. They could love each other openly, without fear, and raise a child together. There was a long moment of silence before Severus nodded, then let his forehead rest against Remus's. "I convinced myself for a long time that such things were not meant for men like me," he admitted, his voice a ragged whisper that tugged at Remus's heart. Remus wrapped his arms around Severus, holding him tight and tangling a hand in his silky black hair. "You are a wonderful man," he insisted. "Any child who has your love will be very fortunate indeed." He pressed his lips to Severus's, coaxing him to relax. "I know I am lucky to have your love." Severus sighed quietly, his hand resting on Remus's back. "I fear the love I have for you is all I am capable of offering," he confessed, his eyes closed. Remus snorted softly. "Now that's just not true at all," he murmured, his thumb stroking the line of Severus's jaw. "You have much more than just your love for me. You wouldn't put up with half the trouble Harry and Draco cause if it were otherwise." He felt a rush of triumph when Severus' thin lips quirked into a reluctant smile. "Come on now, let's get some sleep. We can talk this over again when the time is right." When the war was over, when things were safe, and when Remus could freely admit his love for Severus Snape to the whole world, Severus adjusted them both until they were comfortable, but before he turned out the light he paused. "I will admit, though I am glad the conversation took the turn it did, that isn't actually what I wanted to talk to you about," Remus began, looking up with a puzzled expression. "Isn't that it?" Severus asked, raising an eyebrow. "No, but it was clearly on your mind," Severus replied, watching as Remus blushed. "I just wanted to let you know that I caught Draco brewing lubricant in the lab yesterday, the lemongrass variation." Remus's eyes widened in surprise. This was not what he had expected. "Oh, indeed." Severus felt a faint flush creep across his cheeks. "I thought, given your relationship with Harry, you should be aware that the boys are clearly planning to take that step." The werewolf swallowed hard, battling the instinctive protest rising in his mind. A little voice screamed that the boys were far too young for such things, and that they needed to intervene. But they were 16, or close to it, and they knew what they were doing. Remus had had enough conversations with Harry to understand that neither of them would be pressured into anything they weren't ready for. Still, he didn't want to dwell on the specifics or acknowledge it. "Well then," he said, forcing himself to remain calm and think it through properly. "At least they're adequately preparing. The lemongrass variation, you said? That's the same one you used when we—" Severus blushed but nodded, fighting a smile. Remus smiled back, reminiscing about how nervous they had been back then, tucked away in the Gryffindor dorms one Christmas, when all the other marauders had gone home for the holidays. "That's good then," Remus continued, trying to keep the conversation light. The lemongrass variant had a muscle relaxant and was specifically designed for beginners. Merlin only knew where Draco had found the recipe. Remus suspected it was from the book George Weasley had given Harry in his 4th year. "I told Draco he could come to me if he had concerns," Severus said, his discomfort evident, though a smirk played on his lips. "He told me everything was fine and bolted out of the lab like his cauldron was about to explode." Remus snickered. He probably would have done the same at Draco's age. They're good boys, and they love each other. I don't think we have anything to worry about. Both of those boys had difficult times ahead. They deserved to find joy wherever they could. But let's keep this from Sirius, shall we? Remus added. The poor kids didn't need any more teasing than they already received. Severus huffed a quiet laugh and finally dimmed the light above them. Quite, he agreed, tilting his head for one last kiss before they settled down. Remus sprawled over Severus, tucking his nose into the man's neck, as always. As they drifted off to sleep, Severus's arms tightened slightly around Remus, and the werewolf wondered which of their conversations had prompted this change. Their boys were growing up and taking significant steps, which was terrifying in itself. But there was a bigger step waiting on the horizon, and perhaps, if Remus was lucky, Severus would be willing to take it with him. Chapter 82. On the morning of his 16th birthday, Harry stirred awake to the gentle sensation of fingers stroking his cheeks and jaw. "Morning, beautiful," Draco greeted quietly, his voice a little fuzzy around the edges without Harry's glasses. He leaned in and kissed him slowly. "Happy birthday." It certainly is," Harry agreed, lifting the duvet to invite Draco to join him in bed. The Slytherin was a bit cold and eagerly crawled into Harry's cocoon of blankets, snuggling close. "What are you doing here?" Harry asked, trying to sound casual. Despite the temptation and the knowledge that their guardians wouldn't really care at this point, he had gone to bed alone. "Wanted to be the first to wish you a happy birthday," Draco murmured, tangling their legs together. "And I thought maybe I could give you part of your present early." He let his lips brush the edge of Harry's mouth. Heat rushed to Harry's cheeks, and a different part of him responded with a quick rush of blood. His present. They had decided together that they were ready to take this step, and Harry's birthday was the day to do it. It might seem a little cliché, doing it as soon as he turned 16, but they wanted it to be special, so prior planning felt like the right approach. "Oh," he breathed, inhaling the scent of Draco's shampoo as the blonde kissed his way down Harry's neck, sucking right on the spot that sent shivers through him. Harry's breath hitched, his body arching instinctively, desperate for friction. "Now, you think?" he asked, wondering how early it was. If they missed breakfast, someone would definitely come looking for them. "I said part of your present," Draco murmured, his hand slipping below the waistband of Harry's boxers. "Not the main present. Consider this a preview." Harry relaxed. That was something he could fully get behind. He rolled over, pulling Draco on top of him, thrusting his hips against his boyfriend's body. Merlin, he could hardly. "Wait." Draco began to slide down Harry's body, pulling the dark-haired boy's boxers down as he moved, licking his lips with intent. Harry gasped, his breath hitching as Draco's mouth enveloped him, those grey eyes locked onto Harry's face the entire time. In a rush, Harry fumbled for his glasses. He wanted to see every moment clearly. Draco took him deep, a low moan escaping his throat, and Harry fought to keep from choking him as one hand tangled in silky blonde hair. Fingers began to explore, teasingly playing with Harry's sensitive spots, occasionally venturing further back. Pleasure surged through Harry, and he threw his head back against the pillow, lost in the bliss of the moment. Suddenly, a loud knock echoed through the room. "Happy birthday, pup," Sirius called out, banging on the door a couple more times for good measure. Draco choked, quickly pulling away, a trail of spit connecting him to Harry. "Kerry's making pancakes. Come down when you're ready," Sirius announced, and then silence fell outside. Harry looked down at Draco, still kneeling between his legs, though his own excitement had deflated at the sound of his godfather's voice. He knew you were in here, Harry realized, utterly mortified. He would have come in otherwise. Draco turned bright red, wiping at his mouth. "He can't," he protested, shaking his head. Surely he didn't—" But he trailed off, catching Harry's knowing look. Sirius absolutely would have noticed Draco sneaking over and decided that a loud interruption was in order. "Fucking marauders," Draco groaned, and Harry couldn't help but laugh. He reached down, lifting his boyfriend to eye level, feeling a bit silly with his boxers still caught around one ankle. "Hey, he didn't see anything. He's just guessing," Harry pointed out, planting a kiss on Draco's nose. "He wants a reaction, which is exactly what we're not going to give him." He winked, his green eyes sparkling with mischief. "Put that Slytherin mask to good use, yeah?" Harry teased. With a bit more encouragement, he finally sent Draco back to his room to get dressed. When Draco came down for breakfast, Harry greeted his godfather with a bright smile, hugging him around the shoulders. "Morning, Pads. Thanks for knocking for me. I overslept a bit," he said, stifling a laugh at the surprised look on Sirius's face. "Ooh, blueberry pancakes. Thanks, Kerry." The house elf beamed back at him, and Harry took his usual seat, grinning as the rest of the household wished him a happy birthday. He leaned over to kiss Draco, as if it were their first encounter of the day. Throughout breakfast, Sirius kept glancing between Harry and Draco, seemingly waiting for one of them to slip up. But they had certainly learned a thing or two from Severus Snape. As was tradition, Harry and Draco made their way to the Quidditch pitch to fly together. "I have to say," Harry said, capturing Draco's lips as they hovered side by side, 10 feet above the ground, "it's much better having you here all day on my birthday." "Good to hear you're not sick of me yet," Draco replied dryly, kissing him again. He had already nixed the idea of them climbing onto Harry's firebolt for a proper make-out session, so this was the closest they could get. Harry felt a bit offended by the suggestion that he would lose control of his broom at the slightest distraction, and he already had plans for the room of requirement when they returned to school. He wanted to show Draco exactly what he was capable of on a broom, something to fantasize about during the next Slytherin-Gryffindor match. "It's only fair that I get to be here the whole day, considering you're making me share you with the rest of your friends this evening," Draco mock-pouted, and Harry couldn't help but laugh. "They're our friends, not just mine. Don't pretend you don't like them, even Neville." Harry knew better. Draco had a soft spot for the heirs, and he couldn't deny it. Harry urged Draco to follow him higher into the sky. "They're not as bad as I anticipated," Draco said, a hint of approval in his voice. Harry smiled, feeling a rush of excitement. "I've never had a birthday party before," he confessed, his enthusiasm bubbling over at the thought of celebrating with friends. "Not a proper one. The closest I've come is having you and your mum over. Most of my birthdays I was just alone in my cupboard." Draco's expression shifted, revealing a mix of sadness and anger. Harry swooped closer and pressed his lips against Draco's. "Hey, it's okay," he reassured him. "I'm free of them now." He hadn't shared much about his life with the Dursleys, but over time Draco had pieced together the troubling bits from Harry's scars and offhand comments. Better late than never, right? This is for the best, anyway. If I'd had a birthday party when I started Hogwarts, it would have just been Ron and Hermione. Draco made a face. "I suppose," he relented, his tone softening. "I promise you'll never spend another birthday alone, even if it's just the two of us." His grey eyes sparkled with mischief. "Just wait until we're old enough to legally apparate. I'll spoil you rotten, just as you deserve." Harry smiled at the thought, imagining Draco taking him out on a fancy date for his birthday, ready to hex any nosy reporters who might follow them. Maybe they could even return home for a party with family and friends. It all sounded incredible. "And you wait until we graduate, so your birthday doesn't clash with the start of exams," he teased back, still feeling a twinge of guilt for not doing anything special for Draco's 16th birthday. "One of the many reasons I'm looking forward to being done with school," Draco replied airily. He leaned in for another kiss, and when he pulled back, he was holding the snitch that had been tucked in Harry's pocket. "Best 2? Out of 3? Draco challenged. "If you win, I'll finish that favour I started this morning." Harry's eyes darkened, and he shifted in his seat on his broom. "You're on." It was an easy bet, and they both knew it. Later that evening, everyone except Snape apparated to Longbottom Manor. It served as neutral ground for the birthday party, where secrecy spells wouldn't be disrupted. It was also Neville's celebration, since his birthday was a day before Harry's. Harry handed his best friend a racked gift, a wide grin on his face. "Happy birthday, mate." "You too," Neville replied, amusement dancing in his eyes as he offered a present in return. "It's, from me and Ginny." "Ooh, joint presents already?" Harry teased, only to yelp when Neville playfully punched him in the arm. "Don't be a jerk or I'll take it back," Neville warned. Harry raised an eyebrow. "You really have been spending a lot of time with Ginny this summer, haven't you?" Neville blushed at the comment, and Harry's eyes narrowed. That reaction would definitely be a topic for discussion later. "Come on," Neville said, changing the subject. "The party's outside. You all can come too," he added, gesturing to the small group of adults behind Harry. "Gran, Amelia and the rest are outside as well. And, welcome to Longbottom Manor. Well met." With Draco's hand firmly in his, mostly to keep the Slytherin from escaping, Harry followed Neville out to the garden. It was his first visit to Longbottom Manor, which was about the same size as Seren, though it didn't have the vast woodland surrounding it. Much of the outdoor space was taken up by enormous greenhouses, which didn't surprise him at all. But when they reached a set of French doors leading off the conservatory, Harry beamed at the sight of a large gathering of people and a long table laden with food. Someone had even strung twinkling magical fairy lights through the trees, creating a festive atmosphere. The sun was still hanging in the sky, casting a warm glow over the bushes, though it wasn't quite dark enough to see them yet. "Harry!" The shout was the only warning he got before a whirlwind of red hair collided with him. He coughed, momentarily winded, but quickly wrapped his arms around Ginny. "Hey, Gin, good to see you." "Happy birthday," she beamed, her excitement infectious. "Hi, Draco." "Hello, Ginny," Draco replied with a wry smile. Harry realized, a moment too late, that Ginny was one of the few guests who hadn't properly met Draco as his boyfriend. He tightened his grip on Draco's hand, warmth and happiness flooding his chest. He was at his own birthday party, with his boyfriend by his side and surrounded by friends. A quick glance at Draco revealed that he was aware of the moment too, but he seemed a bit more nervous about it than Harry was. Harry leaned in and kissed Draco's cheek, offering a reassuring smile. Everyone here already knew about them. There was nothing to fear. From across the room, Daphne let out a playful wolf whistle, causing Draco to roll his eyes. "I'm going to—" he started, but trailed off. Harry laughed and kissed him properly before nudging him on his way. "I'm glad everyone could make it," Harry said, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. All the heirs who could risk attending a party at Longbottom Manor were there. everyone except Pansy and Millie. Cassius had even brought Oliver, who had his arm wrapped around Cassius's waist, looking blissfully happy to be able to show their relationship in front of others. Harry could relate to that feeling. Fred and Angelina were there too, with Angelina shooting Draco a narrowed glance, while Fred whispered something in her ear, clearly amused. Of course, she didn't know about their relationship. Oops. Over by the conservatory, the adults were gathered, wine glasses in hand. Not just Neville's Gran and Amelia Bones, but also Bill and Fleur, along with Tonks and Kingsley. And, of course, the group from Seren. Remus was introducing himself to someone nearby. Harry approached Mrs. Longbottom, one of the few people he hadn't met through the Wizengamot. "And miss an excuse to get together?" Ginny pointed out with a grin. "I'm so glad for the chance to get out of the house. Hermione's still visiting, and I'm ready to kill the pair of them." "Does Hermione even see her parents anymore?" Harry asked incredulously. The girl spent most of her year at boarding school, her Christmas breaks either at school or with the Weasleys, and now she was spending most of her summer with them too. "She says she's going home for a bit after the book lists arrive," Ginny replied, though she sounded sceptical. "But she'll be back to stay with us before school starts. Luckily," she added, linking her arm with Neville's, "Mrs. Longbottom thinks I'm a delightful young lady and is happy for me to visit as often as I like." "You've got her fooled then," Harry teased, making Ginny laugh. "Oi, Ginny's not the only one who hasn't seen you in ages, you know," Susan Mock complained from a few feet away. "Aren't you going to say hello?" "Hello," Harry replied dutifully, then turned his back on her, only to snicker at her shout of indignation. "Kidding," he said, heading over to hug her. "Hey, Theo, how's it going?" "Doing well, thanks." Indeed, the Slytherin looked much better than he had when Harry left him at the pottery. He looked like he'd actually slept for one. Harry made his rounds through the group, greeting everyone and accepting birthday presents with bashful smiles. He tucked them all into his extended satchel from Twilfit and Tattings to open later. He wasn't really sure what the protocol was, but he hoped no one would mind. Opening presents in front of his guardians and the Malfoys had been nerve-wracking enough. He didn't want that kind of pressure. When he spotted Parvati, she hugged him tight. "Thank you for the flowers, you absolute gem." "Sweetheart, you didn't have to do that," she said. "I got an E in divination because of you and Lavender," he retorted, just as he had written in the card with the flowers. "You deserved them for dragging me through that class." "I got an O in defense, and I sure as hell wouldn't have done that without you," she argued, smiling fondly. "It's what friends are for." "Then shut up and accept flowers from your friend," Harry teased, and she laughed. "Congrats on the O, that's brilliant." "Ooh, are we swapping exam results already?" Anthony cut in, looking at them with interest. "How'd you do then, Harry?" "Yes, inquiring minds want to know," Ginny added, smirking. "Ron passed 6, mostly A's and E's. Hermione's been insufferable. She didn't do half as well as she expected." She rolled her eyes. "Only 7 O's and 3 E's. A true tragedy," she said in mock dismay. Across the circle, Draco froze, his eyes meeting Harry's with triumph. "I told you, Potter." "I had one more subject. That doesn't count," Harry argued weakly, but Draco just shook his head and turned to Ginny. "Harry got 8 O's, he bragged. It would have been 10, I'm sure, but there was the mess with Hagrid in astronomy, and then that whole vision business in history." Immediately, a wave of exclamations erupted around them. 8 O's! "Blimey, Harry," Ernie said, impressed. "You little brain box," the twins chirped, beaming with pride. Harry felt his cheeks heat. turning to glare at Draco even as a smile threatened to break through. "I did pretty well, I guess," he admitted. Draco laughed and kissed him hard enough for Fred to wolf whistle. "Fucking nerd," he teased fondly. "Practically a Ravenclaw." "Oi!" the 4 Ravenclaws in the group piped up, offended. Harry looked around, desperate for a change in subject. "All right, what about Newts, then? Cassius, how did you do?" Harry asked, already aware of Angelina's results. He knew the twins would be taking theirs at the ministry in a week. Cassius's pale cheeks flushed, and Oliver wrapped an arm around his shoulders, beaming with pride. 5 outstanding, 1 exceeds expectations, the Scotsman declared, planting a kiss on his partner's cheek. It was then that Harry noticed the gold ring glinting on Cassius's left hand, and gasped. "Ring?" he exclaimed, pointing in surprise. Cassius raised an eyebrow at him. "I told you I asked him," Cassius replied. Harry hurried forward, and Oliver smugly extended his hand for Harry to admire. "You didn't mention you did it properly," Harry said, still in awe. "You said nothing about a ring. It's gorgeous." When he looked up, Oliver was grinning like he had just won the World Cup, while Cassius gazed at his partner with barely restrained adoration. "This is brilliant. I'm so happy for you both," Harry said. Oliver released Cassius to pull Harry into a bear hug. "Couldn't have done it without you, mate," he insisted, ruffling Harry's hair. "We haven't set a date yet, but now that he's given me a ring, he can't change his mind," he joked, winking. "Really?" "Bugger," Cassius said dryly, and Oliver just laughed. "Sorry to interrupt, but we got bored waiting for the birthday boy to come to us," said Bill, with Fleur by his side. Harry turned to them and smiled sheepishly. "Sorry, there are just so many people here." He wasn't used to having so many folks around, all expecting to talk to him. Was that what birthday parties were like? "No worries, kid," Bill teased, clapping Harry on the shoulder. "Happy birthday. Here." He held out a present, but had to wait for Fleur to finish kissing Harry's cheeks before he could actually take it. "And congrats on the exam results. Charlie's been bragging all week," Bill added with a wink. "You'd think he was your godfather, not Sirius the way he—" Going on. Harry felt his cheeks heat up. This was news to him. He glanced over at the dragon tamer, who was chatting animatedly with Tonks. Had he really been bragging about Harry's exam results? It was overwhelming to have so many people expressing their pride in him. What was the right way to respond to that? Eventually, Harry decided to change the subject and accept that he would likely be blushing for most of the day. Was this what it meant to have a family? Fortunately, after the initial wave of greetings, well wishes and congratulations, the party became much easier for Harry to manage. People began to break off into smaller groups, allowing him to drift between them and spend a little time with everyone. He made sure to visit the adults, especially Mrs. Longbottom, to thank her for hosting the celebration. As the mingling continued, Charlie came over to congratulate Oliver on his engagement and to meet Cassius properly. Bill and Fleur joined them, with Fleur introducing Bill to her ex-Yule ball date. Cassius jokingly warned Bill to treat her well. Soon Tonks approached, claiming that the proper adults were less fun, and before long everyone was spread out, chatting and laughing. At one point, the twins set up a record player, mixing both wizarding and muggle music, and they cleared a little makeshift dance floor. For the first time in his life, Harry found himself standing awkwardly while a crowd sang "Happy Birthday" to him. Fortunately, Neville stood right beside him, looking just as uncomfortable, which made it a little easier to bear. Once they cut the cake, they were free to enjoy themselves. Harry eyed the twins warily before taking a bite. So far, there hadn't been any surprises in the food, But he wasn't entirely convinced that the twins would behave, even after Blaise promised they wouldn't mess with his birthday party. As the sun began to set, the fairy lights twinkled brighter, some of them dancing wildly when Luna came over to whisper to the little creatures. Dancing, too, Daphne watched with a fond smile curling at her lips. The music was turned up, and Harry managed to drag Draco out onto the dance floor with him. "Think of it as payback for ignoring me at the Yule Ball," he teased, playfully shimmying beside the blonde in an effort to get him to loosen up. "I wasn't ignoring you at the Yule Ball," Draco retorted archly. "I just couldn't go over and dance with you. Believe me, I was staring at you all night." Harry laughed and kissed him before moving to dance beside Susan and Hannah. Most of Draco's reluctance was just for show. Soon he was dancing happily with Harry, his hands wandering a little too inappropriately on occasion. It served as a constant reminder of what they had planned for after the party, slowly driving Harry to the edge of frustration. But there was so much else happening around him that he couldn't dwell on the thought of being alone with Draco later. His friends were there, and he wanted to enjoy their time together, knowing he didn't know when they would all be able to gather like this again, especially with half of them already graduated. With so many in difficult positions due to the war, Harry tried not to think too hard about it. Neville's Gran retired for the evening not long after sunset, assuring everyone that anyone who wished to stay the night was welcome. Kingsley left around the same time, though Tonks stayed behind, waving goodbye to her partner and promising to see him bright and early at work in the morning. Harry couldn't help but notice the heavy-handed wink she gave, making him wonder just how many glasses of wine she had consumed. It seemed those two were the only ones considered real adults, as the party got a little wilder after that. With Sirius right in the mix, exchanging prank spells with the twins, he certainly wasn't looked at as adult supervision. Even though Remus had taught many of them, he lost any air of maturity when Sirius egged him into sharing some of his own tricks. Harry shared his own pranking secrets, while Amelia and Narcissa lingered in their own corner, their glasses of wine never empty. They seemed to ignore the party completely, occasionally erupting in laughter that startled the crowd. Wisely, no one dared to interrupt them to ask what they were discussing. For one night, they could all be carefree teenagers, dancing and sipping butterbeer, and fire whiskey, which Charlie generously passed around from a charmed flask. They chatted about school and simply enjoyed each other's company, with no mention of Dark Lords, Dumbledore, or the Ministry. It was perfect. Of course, with the twins in attendance, there were fireworks. Longbottom Manor was far enough away from neighbours, no one for a 4-mile radius, so they didn't have to worry about being seen. The Weasleys' whiz-bangs lit up the sky with elaborate displays of light and colour, many of which they recognised from the prank against Umbridge, prompting cheers and whoops from the crowd. They all stopped dancing to watch the show, and Harry leaned back against Draco's chest, feeling the warmth of the blonde's hands resting on his hips. He could sense Draco's breath catch with every loud bang or particularly impressive firework. "That was amazing, guys!" Harry exclaimed when the display ended, and the twins took elaborate bows in response to the applause. "Only the best for our favourite birthday boys," George said, tipping an imaginary hat to Harry. "Even if one of you did wait until after we left school to put his paws all over our little sister," Fred added, gently elbowing Neville with a smirk. "Oh, leave him alone," Ginny grumbled. "Anyone who was in that common room can attest that it was definitely Ginny doing the pawing, don't worry." Parvati chimed in boldly, eliciting a loud chorus of "oohs" from the group. Ginny simply grinned, unashamed, and wrapped her arms around Neville's waist. "Can you blame me?" she remarked, making her cheeks flush even more. Ginny's boyfriend turned even redder when she playfully patted him on the backside. "Had to get my claim in there first," she said with a mischievous grin. "Our little sister's all grown up and pawing at boys," Fred wailed in mock despair, glancing over at Bill. "With the examples we all gave her, are you surprised?" Bill joked, casting a pointed look at Charlie, who was wrapped around Sirius like an octopus, trying to ward off the chill. "On the contrary, I couldn't be prouder," George chimed in, giving Ginny a thumbs up, while his other hand rested in the back pocket of Blaze's jeans. "You get 'em, sis." As Ginny kissed Neville passionately, a chorus of wolf whistles erupted around them. The music was turned back up, and the party continued to buzz with excitement. By the time it was almost midnight, the energy began to wind down. Amelia had gone to bed, Remus and Narcissa had headed home, and even Bill and Fleur were calling it a night. Half the couples had slipped away to find a dark corner for a little snogging. Harry and Draco were among those couples for a brief moment, but then Tonks found them and insisted they both dance with her to her favourite song. When Charlie tapped the record player with his wand, ending the music, there were a few groans, but everyone was too tired to complain about the idea of heading to bed. Only a handful were staying the night, those who couldn't flew home easily or travel in some other way. Ginny faced a bit of teasing from her brothers when she announced she was staying for the night, but none of them raised a real fuss. They liked Neville, and they knew better than to treat Ginny like a baby by now. As everyone prepared to head home, there were hugs all around. Harry made sure to give Neville an extra long hug. "Thanks again for organising all this, Nev, and please thank your Gran for hosting," he said warmly. "It was fun," Neville agreed, grinning widely. "Best birthday I've ever had for sure. We should do it again next year if we can." Harry liked the sound of that. Making sure After saying goodbye to everyone and promising to write soon, Harry took Draco's hand and led him over to Sirius and Charlie. Sirius had Charlie's cardigan draped around him, looking a bit oversized for his slighter frame. He grinned at Harry and wrapped an arm around his shoulders. "You ready, pup?" he asked. "Are you two okay to apparate?" Harry teased, fully aware of how much they had both indulged from Charlie's flask. Charlie laughed, flashing a roguish grin. "Kid, I've apparated far drunker than this. We'll be fine. Good to go?" As they waved goodbye to their friends, Harry held tightly to Sirius while Draco did the same with Charlie. With that familiar, uncomfortable squeezing sensation that Harry was starting to get used to, they found themselves back at the ward boundary of Seren. Harry's stomach lurched a little, but since he hadn't had much to drink, it wasn't too bad. "Drink water," Sirius advised, calling for Kerry to bring them each a large glass. He ruffled Harry's hair and leaned down to kiss his forehead. "Good birthday, then?" "The best," Harry assured him, beaming. "Good." Sirius nudged Harry toward the stairs. "Come on, then. It's bedtime for all of us, I think." Harry wasn't quick enough to avoid seeing the heated look Sirius shot Charlie, and he desperately wished he had missed it. They all headed up the stairs, and Sirius paused outside the door to his and Charlie's room. "Good night, you two. Keep the noise down," he said with an exaggerated wink. "Love you, Mischief." Good night, guys," Harry stuttered, feeling his cheeks flush. Charlie waved as he followed Sirius into their room, leaving Harry and Draco alone in the corridor. Harry felt his face heat up as he bit his lip. "Should we, He gestured toward his room, trying not to spill his water. His heart raced as he stepped inside. This was it. This was the big moment. Harry shut the door behind them and noticed his hands were trembling. Was he nervous too? That was good, sort of. He didn't really want both of them to be anxious, but he also didn't want to be the only one quietly freaking out. It felt ridiculous. They'd done just about everything else together. Why did this one act hold so much significance? Plenty of things they'd already done could be considered sex. But this was different. This was the moment people talked about when they referenced losing your virginity. It was a big deal. He set his water down on the desk and shrugged off his jacket, unable to meet Draco's gaze. When he sat on the edge of the bed, a wave of exhaustion washed over him, his muscles aching from all the dancing. Draco was bent over in front of him, stepping out of his jeans, and while Harry's heart raced at the sight of Draco's backside in green silk boxers, it wasn't the overwhelming burn of lust he had anticipated. He unzipped his own jeans, letting his fingers brush against his half-hard length, trying to stir that heat. As he did, Draco's silver eyes caught his, and they both paused. "Should we... Are you..." They spoke at the same time and both blushed. "You first," Draco said, walking over with his shirt half unbuttoned to stand in front of Harry. Harry's hands instinctively went to Draco's hips, his thumbs settling into the dips of his back. "Are you... kind of... tired?" he asked hesitantly, hoping he wasn't about to ruin everything. There was a beat of silence, and then slowly Draco fell face first onto the mattress with a soft thump, rolling over to look up at Harry. "Merlin, yes," he sighed, his gaze apologetic. "I don't think we thought this through." Harry chuckled, suddenly giddy with relief. He kicked off his jeans and patted Draco's thigh. "I think overthinking it was our problem," he replied. Harry lay down beside Draco, their noses almost touching. "I want our first time to be special," he admitted, "but putting all that pressure on it feels a bit... much." He had spent half the day thinking about it, and now that they were finally here, he felt exhausted just from running through every possible scenario in his mind. "There's no rush. We've got half the summer ahead of us still, and it's not like we're sneaking around behind our parents' backs or anything." Draco had shared how utterly mortifying it was to get caught by Snape while brewing lube, but thankfully no embarrassing conversations had followed. "I want you," Draco murmured, and as always those words sent a delicious shiver down Harry's spine. "But without sounding like an utter Hufflepuff, it's going to be special not because it's your birthday or we've planned it, but because it's you, and I love you." He tilted his chin for a kiss, their lips moving languidly together. "And to be entirely honest, I don't think either of us is up for performing at our best right now," he added, his eyes trailing over Harry and pausing on the slight bulge in his underwear. Harry chuckled, grabbing the collar of Draco's shirt and pulling him into a messy kiss. "I love you too," he murmured, "and all I really want right now is for both of us to get naked, and then go the hell to sleep, because it has been a really long day." He cracked a lopsided smile. "Rain check on the birthday present?" "Deal," Draco agreed. To Harry's amusement, the blonde didn't even bother getting back up to finish undressing. He unbuttoned the rest of his shirt while sprawled out in the middle of the bed, wriggling out of his underwear in a very graceless move that he would never admit to anyone but Harry. Harry tugged his t-shirt over his head, dropped his pants, and performed a wandless tooth-cleaning charm. He then drained his glass of water just in case. Harry woke up with a headache the next morning. After a moment of hesitation, he finally nudged Draco over enough to fit both of them under the duvet. Pulling the blonde close, he revelled in the sensation of their bare skin against each other. It felt incredible, yet the warmth only stirred a low hum of arousal beneath his exhaustion. He tangled his fingers in Draco's soft hair and kissed him deeply. It was perfect. No need for anything more at that moment. "Happy birthday, Scarhead," Draco whispered, planting another kiss on his lips before settling against him, burying his face in the curve of Harry's neck. They drifted off to sleep within minutes, smiles lingering on their faces. Harry's last hazy thought was that it would take something truly extraordinary to top this birthday next year. But then he jolted awake with a gasp, screams still echoing in his ears and the metallic scent of blood lingering in the back of his throat. Draco was right there beside him, gently stroking his forehead. He carefully placed Harry's glasses on his face, and the world sharpened into focus, revealing Draco's worry-filled grey eyes. "What was it?" Draco whispered, dread lacing his voice. Harry grimaced as he pulled himself into a sitting position. "My birthday present," he spat, squeezing his eyes shut. "A family of muggles. The words faltered. He couldn't bring himself to voice what Voldemort and his Death Eaters had done to that poor family. His stomach churned, but he fought to suppress the nausea. "Fuck." Draco wrapped his arms around him tightly. "Do you need me to get someone?" "No, it's too late for that," Harry replied, realizing they were both naked, a detail that would raise a lot of questions with any adults in the house. "What time is it?" "A little after 5, Draco answered. Harry sighed, knowing it would be hard to get back to sleep in any meaningful way. "Sorry," he murmured. "Don't be daft," Draco said dismissively. "You didn't ask for this." He adjusted Harry's position, making sure he was comfortable. Draco lay against Harry's chest, gently stroking his hair. Harry let his eyes flutter half shut, wishing he could erase the horrifying images from his mind. "Fucking Voldemort," he muttered. "I had such a nice birthday too. Why does he have to ruin everything?" Draco didn't respond, and they lingered in silence, with Draco continuing to soothe Harry's hair as the shudders slowly subsided. Even the goblins had no explanation for why Harry felt echoes of Voldemort's Cruciatus curses in his visions, but the aftermath often left him with muscle spasms the next morning. At 7, Harry finally gave up on the hope of returning to sleep. He sat up and stretched his arms. "I'm going to take a shower," he announced, leaning down to press a kiss to Draco's lips. "I'd ask you to join me, but—" "Visions are a bit of a mood killer," Draco finished knowingly. "It's fine." They both climbed out of bed. Harry grabbed his dressing gown and a fresh towel, while Draco slipped on just enough of his clothes from the night before to cover himself before sneaking back to his own room. After showering and feeling slightly better, Harry made his way down to the kitchen. Remus and Snape were the only ones awake, both looking at him with mild surprise. "Harry," Remus greeted, "I thought you'd sleep in this morning." "So did I," Harry replied bitterly. "But Voldemort decided to give me a birthday present. Nothing we can do," he added, noticing both men tense up. "But that poor Muggle family, I don't even know who they were." It was likely Voldemort had a specific reason for choosing them, but that was a mystery to Harry. "Oh, cub, I'm sorry." Remus pulled him into a comforting hug, and Kerry floated over a cup of tea. "Are you sure you don't want to do the ritual with the goblins? I hate that you're having to suffer through all of this." "These visions save lives, Moony," Harry insisted. "I can't give that up just to sleep a bit better." Remus fixed him with a searching look, but eventually sighed, shaking his head. "There's no convincing you, is there?" "He's a Gryffindor, Remus. Are you surprised?" Snape muttered wryly. Draco joined them, and neither of the adults seemed surprised that he already knew about Harry's vision. Harry was too tired to feel embarrassed by that. When Sirius came down, he was grinning widely, clearly ready to start throwing around innuendo. but when he saw the expressions on their faces, his smile faded. "What's wrong?" "Vision," Harry explained. "Apparently the Dark Lord's idea of a perfect birthday present is torturing a bunch of innocent muggles on my behalf. No wonder he doesn't have any friends." Draco snorted behind his teacup. "Oh, pup, no." Sirius's face fell. "Are you all right?" "Fine." At least he would be, once he could close his eyes without seeing that little girl's terrified, bloodied face. "Well, Moony and I had plans for you boys today, but if you'd rather postpone, that's completely fine." "Plans? What plans?" Draco asked, narrowing his eyes. Sirius and Remus shared a small grin. "We thought we'd take you to some of our old haunts in Muggle London. Obviously none of the over-18 places," Sirius added quickly, glancing at Narcissa. "But a couple of spots we loved when we were your age. They've changed a bit, but they're still worth a visit." Harry perked up a little. That sounded like the perfect distraction from the images swimming in his head. The prospect of showing Draco Muggle London was bound to cheer him up. "No, we can do that today," he insisted. "I want to." Sirius brightened. "Good. We'll leave at around 9 then." Snape set down his paper, eyeing Remus with a flat expression. "You're taking them to Infinite, aren't you?" he asked, sounding resigned. Remus's eyes twinkled with mischief. "We are. Want me to bring you back anything? Or maybe something from the place next door?" he added teasingly. "That dump is still in business?" Snape raised an eyebrow. "Oi, watch what you're calling a dump," Sirius chimed in, feigning offence. "I found some great stuff in that shop, and on second thought, please don't ever tell me what you and Remus did or saw or bought in there. I really don't need those mental images." Harry had no idea what kind of shop they were talking about, but judging by the look on Sirius's face, he could take a few educated guesses. Snape turned to Remus, smirking slowly. "I'll give you a list," he drawled, prompting a groan from Sirius. The old haunts that Sirius and Remus mentioned turned out to be a series of hole-in-the-wall shops in a sketchy corner of Soho, their doors plastered with stickers, one proudly displaying a rainbow flag from an upper window. The first shop they entered was a record store, and Harry stared in awe at the variety of music available. "I bought my first ever Muggle record from this shop when I was 14, Sirius declared proudly, resting a hand on Harry's shoulder. "Go have a look and see what strikes your fancy." Harry had very little frame of reference for what he might like, but he flipped through the record bins anyway, pausing at covers that caught his eye, or band names he recognized. Tonks and Sirius were both trying to broaden his musical education, which was giving him some eclectic tastes, to say the least. They left the shop with a handful of records shrunk in Sirius's bag, and headed a few doors down to a place called Infinite. The sign was small, simply displaying a rainbow infinity symbol on a black background. Harry quickly glanced at the shop next door, where a sign declared that under-18s were not allowed inside. As Harry examined the stickers surrounding the entrance, he confirmed his suspicions. This place was a sex shop. Heat rushed to his cheeks, and he quickly averted his gaze. Perhaps they could return to that one later, under glamours. But Infinite was equally intriguing, and more than a little risque in its own right. Sirius laughed when Draco turned bright red at the sight of a large framed drawing of a naked man. He tactfully moved to the other side of the shop as the boys began browsing certain sections. From the outside it didn't seem very big, but once inside Harry discovered it was quite spacious. He wandered over to a small book section and found a shelf filled with non-fiction books on sexuality and gender, Muggle versions of the book George had once given him, along with what appeared to be a newer edition of the book on the gender spectrum that Remus had shared. A few titles piqued his interest, so he added them to his basket. On a lower shelf, he spotted a collection of clearly labelled queer erotica novels. Feeling a bit daring, he picked one up, thinking Draco would probably find it amusing. Along the back wall there were some T-shirts emblazoned with flags and slogans. Harry grabbed a couple, not just because he liked them, but also with the intention of wearing them around Hogwarts to annoy Dumbledore. When he found Draco again, the blonde was staring, a mix of horror and fascination on his face, at what appeared to be a blown glass dildo. Harry slipped in behind him, planting a kiss on the back of his neck. "Find anything fun?" he teased, feeling Draco lean back against him. "Muggles really have thought of everything, haven't they?" Draco whispered, awed. "Just about," Harry chuckled, taking Draco's hand and leading him to a display of bizarre novelty toys. At that moment, a young woman emerged from behind the register, her bright pink hair and multiple piercings giving her a vibrant look. She seemed like someone Tonks would get along with famously. "Hey," she said with a cheerful smile. "Are you two looking for anything in particular that I can help with?" she asked. Harry shrugged. "Not really. We've never been here before. My godfathers brought us," he explained, scanning the shop for either Sirius or Remus, but they were nowhere to be found. Perhaps it was intentional, giving them the privacy to explore without the embarrassment of having an adult looking over their shoulders. "Ah, inducting the baby gaze. I love it," the woman cooed, her enthusiasm infectious. "Well, welcome. I'm June. The sign on the door says we check IDs, but to be honest, we only have that up to keep the police off our backs about distributing pornography," she added with a roll of her eyes. "Let me know if you need any help or anything, okay? Also, you two are very cute together." She grinned as they both blushed, then retreated back behind the counter. Harry could have spent hours in that shop. Everywhere he looked, there was something intriguing. While much of it was undeniably sexual, there was also a plethora of tamer items celebrating pride and encouraging self-exploration, helping people become comfortable in their own skin. Even in the wizarding world, where homosexuality was far less taboo than it was among Muggles, he couldn't imagine finding a shop like this. He thought about teenage Sirius and Remus, recalling the memories he had seen in the Pensive, how they had kicked around this place during their summers. Remus bringing Snape in when he knew Sirius wouldn't be there, both of them enjoying the anonymity of the Muggle world to be a couple, even if only within these walls. It felt like a safe haven, like a warm embrace in a shop. "Come in," it seemed to say. "Feel welcome here, even when you don't feel welcome anywhere else." "I like this place," he murmured. Draco nodded, humming quietly. "Me too." They continued to browse, reassured by June's promise that she wouldn't ID them for anything. Harry quickly glanced around to ensure Sirius was nowhere in sight. He added a book of gay sex positions and some flavored lube to his basket, smirking at Draco's blush. June rang him up without batting an eyelash. Harry imagined she'd seen all sorts of purchases in a place like this. Just as he was putting his items away in his bag, Sirius appeared out of nowhere. "What do you think, pup?" he asked, a slight smile on his face. There was a knowing look in his eyes when Harry smiled back. "It's really cool," Harry confirmed. Sirius's grin widened. "Where's Remus?" "Next door, I think." Harry froze at the implication, then shuddered. I should not have asked. Behind him, he heard June giggle quietly. "Are you, buying anything, Sirius?" Draco asked, his voice a little strained. Sirius barked out a laugh. "Nah, don't worry. This trip is all for you guys." Then, because he was serious and loved to tease, he smirked lasciviously. "Charlie and I went on our own shopping trip last week." Harry groaned, shaking his head. "Nope, don't want to know," he declared vehemently. "Oh, come on, Harry," Sirius wheedled, wiggling his eyebrows. "There's nothing to be ashamed of. It's all perfectly natural." "It's not out of shame," Harry retorted. "It's out of a desire to kiss my own boyfriend without getting mental images of what you get up to with yours." Sirius laughed again, ruffling his godson's hair. "It's not me and mine you should worry about. It's Remus and his," he teased. "You still have to look Snape in the eye in class for 2 more years. And that's why we're not going to talk about whatever Remus is buying next door," Harry shot back pointedly. Before Sirius could say anything more, Harry turned to June, who was valiantly holding back her laughter. "Thanks for your help," he said. "I'm sure we'll be back sometime," Harry said. "Glad to hear it," she replied with a smile, playing with her lip piercing. "Sounds like you guys have an interesting family dynamic." Harry snorted. "That's one word for it." She hadn't even heard the half of it. "Well, it's good to know you have a solid support network. A lot of kids aren't lucky enough to have someone who would bring them to a place like this, let alone anything else." June's voice was soft, prompting Harry to glance back at Sirius fondly. "Yeah, I know. I'm definitely lucky." Sirius slung an arm around Harry's neck, kissing the top of his hair. "I'm not letting you have the same crappy teenage years I did, Mischief," he promised. "When I was your age, this place and your dad were the only things keeping me sane. God, it's good to be back." "Are you sure you don't want to look around?" Harry asked, raising an eyebrow, but Sirius shook his head. "Nah, we've got other places to be. Come on, let's go pick up our lone wolf." They bid a cheerful goodbye to June and left the shop. Just then, the door on their left opened, and Remus walked out, tucking a brown paper bag into his satchel. He froze for a moment, staring at the 3 of them before breaking into a wry smile. "Where to next, then?" Harry exchanged a look with Draco. Yes, they were definitely never going to ask. They spent most of the day in London, visiting more shops that Sirius insisted were crucial to their queer education. Afterward, they headed over to Leicester Square to grab burgers and people-watch. Well, Draco was people-watching. Harry was more focused on Draco's reaction to experiencing Muggle life at its finest. Remus would later describe the look in Harry's eyes as utterly smitten. Harry couldn't even pretend to be annoyed about the call-out. It was true. Draco's joy and incredulity at seeing perfectly ordinary Muggle things was absolutely adorable, and Harry couldn't wait to see more. One day, Sirius promised to introduce them to even more. When they got home, he clapped both of them on the shoulders and said to let him know if they wanted him to take them back anywhere in the future. Then he transformed into Padfoot and bounded across the grass, barking happily. Remus sighed, shaking his head in fond bemusement. "He's 16 all over again," he muttered. "Silly dog. I suppose I'll be out here playing fetch for a while. I'll see you boys later." With that, he jogged off after the shaggy black dog, leaving the 2 teenagers to head inside. They made their way toward the stairs. Harry wanted to stash away his new purchases before Sirius, or anyone else, could get curious and start snooping. He wasn't surprised when Draco followed him to his room. After all, their purchases were in the same bag. "I had no idea shops like that even existed," the blonde mused, still looking a little overwhelmed by the day's events. "Me neither," Harry replied, setting his satchel on the bed and pulling out more bags than a Muggle would expect to fit in such a space. "I mean, I knew they had to exist. I'd heard my aunt and uncle talk about how depraved and perverted it all was, but I never really thought about what might be inside one. With a wave of his wand, his new clothes hung neatly in his wardrobe, while his new books found a spot on his shelf. He eyed the lube thoughtfully before deciding to put it in his bedside drawer. When he turned around, Draco was holding a roll of dark green bondage tape, and Harry's eyes went wide. "I didn't see you buy that," he said, surprised. "I can be sneaky," Draco replied with a drawl, stepping closer. It looked interesting. Interesting was definitely one way to put it. Harry felt his throat go a little dry. "You know, I was thinking," he began, his voice low, "next summer, once we've got our apparition licenses, we could conjure up a couple of fake IDs and check out some of those shops we're too young to enter. What do you think?" Draco's eyes darkened. "It's a date," he replied, holding the tape in one hand while letting his other slide around to Harry's backside, squeezing lightly. "Now, what shall we do with the rest of our evening?" "I've got a few ideas." After everything he'd seen in those shops, Harry had plenty of thoughts racing through his mind. One idea surged to the forefront, making his blood rush. "We could take that rain check, if you're interested." He waved his hand, locking and silencing the door. Draco gaped slightly. "You want to?" "I've kind of been thinking about it since we left Infinite," Harry admitted, his voice low. I'm ready, if you are." "Yeah," Draco breathed, nodding dazedly. Yeah, okay then." Harry quickly shoved his satchel off the bed and pulled his t-shirt over his head, careful not to tangle his glasses. His heart thudded hard against his ribs, but this time he felt no nerves, only excitement and a near-overwhelming arousal. This was Draco, his Draco, the boy he'd known since they were 11, the boy he'd loved since they were 14. After a day surrounded by erotica, phallic objects and so much pride, Harry felt silly for having worried about this moment before. It was a big deal, sure, but it didn't have to be scary. Not with Draco. He'd enjoyed everything they'd done together, even the moments that had started out a bit awkward. Why would this be any different? They fell onto the bed, tugging at each other's clothes and grinning into open-mouthed kisses. Harry got distracted, leaving a hickey on Draco's neck, reveling in the breathy moans that spilled from his lips. But then Draco yanked his trousers down and gripped him firmly, making Harry arch into him with a gasp. "Easy," he warned. "Don't make me go too early." Harry smirked as he kissed Draco, playfully biting at his bottom lip. "I want you to enjoy this," he murmured. Soon they were completely naked, a sight that was familiar to Harry, yet it still sent a thrill through him. He ran his fingers over Draco's flawless pale skin in awe, knowing he would never tire of admiring his body. Reluctantly pulling away from Draco's right nipple, Harry reached for the vial that Draco had tucked away in the bedside drawer a few days ago. This wasn't new for them. They had used lubricant before, including the concoction Harry had brewed in the Chamber of Secrets. They had practiced stretching each other, discovering that sweet spot that sent fireworks of pleasure coursing through them. Taking this step felt entirely natural now, especially since they hadn't spent days psyching themselves up for it. Kneeling between Draco's spread knees, Harry let the vial rest forgotten on the bedsheets as he stroked the sensitive skin of Draco's inner thighs. He leaned in to kiss him, grinding his hips down into Draco's, their bodies pressed together, their cocks trapped between their stomachs. Draco let out a moan, raising one arm above his head, a pink flush spreading across his face and down his neck. "Go on, Harry," he urged, his voice thick with anticipation. "I'm ready." They had agreed it would be this way for their first time. Harry placed a tender kiss on Draco's lips before sliding down his body, his tongue darting out to tease Draco's cock, just enough to make him jerk in response. "Fucking tease," Draco swore, causing Harry to grin. He nudged Draco's legs a little wider and grabbed a pillow to prop under Draco's hips. Although the book suggested starting on all fours, they both preferred to be face to face, even if it meant a little more discomfort at the beginning. Finally, he reached for the vial of lubricant, uncorking it carefully and pouring some over his fingers. As he shuffled down, he pressed a soft kiss to the inside of Draco's thigh. Draco's thigh trembled as Harry slid his first finger in. A long, low groan escaped Draco, and Harry's entire body thrummed with arousal at the feeling of the blonde's muscles relaxing for him. He had done this a few times before, but this time he would finally experience that tight heat around him. He added a second finger, moving carefully, searching for that perfect angle. When he found it, Draco's back arched and he cried out, his hand clenching against the sheets. "Fuck, Harry, please," he gasped, the sound sending a rush of desire straight to Harry's groin. "More." Harry slid in a third finger, curving them gently to rub over Draco's prostate once more. The noises Draco made were incredible, and for a moment Harry worried he might not last long enough to even get inside him. Looking at Draco, sprawled out on Harry's bed, his face a picture of bliss, Harry felt a surge of heat. He had to take a deep breath to steady himself. He worked his fingers in deeper until Draco's muscles relaxed a little more, then leaned down to press a soft kiss to Draco's stomach. Can I... Harry struggled to find the words, but Draco looked up at him, pupils wide with need. "Yes, fuck," he breathed. "I need you inside me, Harry. Come on." Harry inhaled sharply. "Okay then." He reached for the vial of lubricant, generously slicking up his cock. The book always said there was no such thing as too much. Slowly, his thighs already quivering, he lined himself up carefully. He locked eyes with Draco, a slight smile creeping onto his face. He was glad he'd kept his glasses on. He wanted to see this as clearly as possible. "I love you," he said softly, and Draco's gaze darkened. "I love you too. Now move." Harry pressed against Draco's slick entrance, and ever so slowly began to sink inside. Draco stiffened, his spine straightening as he instinctively tensed, and Harry gently stroked over his stomach, reassuring him. Harry's lube-slick hand wrapped around his boyfriend's cock, gently coaxing him through the initial discomfort. For Harry, it was the most incredible feeling in the world, the tight, hot pressure surrounding him, knowing it was Draco he was inside. Draco grimaced slightly, and Harry froze. "No," Draco urged. "Keep going, it's just weird. Keep moving." Harry nodded and continued, moving as slowly as he dared, focusing on his breathing to keep himself from coming too soon. He felt a wave of relief that they had taken their time to reach this point. A few months ago, he knew he wouldn't have been able to control himself, and it would have ended embarrassingly quickly. Once he was fully inside, he paused, looking down at Draco with concern. "You okay?" Draco nodded. Unable to resist, Harry leaned down to kiss him. As soon as their lips met, Draco shouted. "What?" Harry pulled back, alarmed. "Did that hurt?" Draco shook his head, reaching up to grab Harry's shoulder and pull him back into a messy, gasping kiss. "No, fuck, that's more." He met Harry's gaze, his eyes filled with urgency. "Move, Potter, now." Harry chuckled, a relieved smile spreading across his face as he obeyed. He started with small jolts of his hips, testing the waters, and then grew bolder when he saw that Draco was enjoying it. Finally, he found that perfect spot, feeling Draco clench tightly around him as he bucked up against Harry, drawing him in deeper. "Fuck, just go for it," Draco urged, his fingers tightening on Harry's shoulder. "Stop holding back. I want it." Harry eyed him skeptically, but began to push harder, bracing himself against the headboard. Draco moaned with every thrust, eyes closed, one hand wrapped around himself. In that moment, Harry realized he wasn't going to last much longer. "Draco," he breathed. He breathed deeply as the blonde pulled him into another kiss, gasping into his mouth. "Draco, I'm going to do it." There was a challenge dancing in those grey eyes, and as always, Harry rose to it with confidence. He thrust into Draco, losing himself in the rhythm, the pleasure intensifying with each movement. He pulled one hand off the headboard and gripped Draco's cock, determined to make his boyfriend come before he did. With a single swipe of his thumb over the weeping tip, Draco arched up, and suddenly Harry saw stars as Draco clenched around him, overwhelmed by the force of his orgasm. He had no hope of lasting through that, spilling into Draco with a ragged cry, the climax hitting him with such intensity that he could hardly catch his breath for a moment. He slumped down onto Draco, careful not to fall fully on top of him, feeling Draco's release sticky between them. His cock slipped out, still sensitive from the aftershocks, and they lay there, breathing heavily, Harry's face pressed against Draco's collarbone. "Oh," Draco sighed eventually, a sigh of satisfaction that made Harry feel boneless, warmth flooding through his body. How was that for you?" Harry managed to lift his head, grinning dazedly. "Fucking amazing," he declared, planting a kiss on Draco's chin. "You?" "Yeah," Draco agreed, nodding, his chest still heaving. "Sweet Merlin." As the sweat on Harry's skin began to cool, he became aware of other things that were cooling much more uncomfortably. He cast as gentle a cleaning charm as he could manage, but both of them still squirmed at the sensation of magic. He shuffled further up Draco's body, their heads resting next to each other on the pillow. "I love you," he murmured, rolling them over and pulling Draco on top of him, seeking as much skin contact as he could. Fuck. We can do that again, right?" Draco laughed. "I fucking hope so," he retorted. "Maybe next time." "We could try it the other way around and see how that feels," Draco suggested. Despite having just experienced his own release, the idea sent a thrilling rush of pleasure through Harry's veins. Merlin, he thought. He hoped their next encounter would be soon. Chapter 83. The prophet was becoming bolder in its attempts to defame Harry, filled with quotes from Dumbledore and other so-called anonymous witnesses discussing Harry's troubling behavior at school over the past year. Fortunately, according to a letter Harry had just received from Mrs. Frobisher, the latest issue was enough for her to send a strong cease and desist in their direction. "It won't stop Dumbledore, but it will give you some peace from the prophet. Amelia and I are working on the rest. We're handling this, Harry, don't worry," she had written. It was a novel feeling to have someone so dedicated to protecting his public image. Harry understood that it would only do so much. The damage had already been done by Dumbledore's words, but it was reassuring to know that this would all come to an end soon. Now that August was well underway, the new school year felt uncomfortably close on the horizon. A month could be a long time. After all, they had already packed so much into the first month of summer, but still the little clock in the back of his mind ticked ominously. It was a strange world indeed, when returning to school felt like stepping into enemy territory. Despite this, the rest of the household was determined not to let him get too caught up in his worries. He trained whenever he could, still making time for fun with the others. If it seemed like he was getting lost in his own thoughts, Draco was more than happy to pull him upstairs, while their guardians pretended not to notice. Harry had to fight back the dreamy smile that threatened to take over whenever he thought about his boyfriend. Draco had grown bolder since the day after Harry's birthday, when they had finally taken that significant step. It was as if Draco had been holding his breath, wondering if every moment alone would turn into that big one. Now that they had reached that point, and both enjoyed the process, Draco seemed more relaxed in the bedroom than Harry had seen him since before exams. Though they tried not to let their worries overshadow their summer, the weight of what was to come still lingered in the air. They chose to spend every night together, not out of fear of their guardians discovering their relationship. Everyone in the house was well aware of the boys' intimacy, much to their embarrassment, but because they didn't want to grow accustomed to falling asleep side by side, only to face the struggle of separating once they returned to Hogwarts. Additionally, Harry was still experiencing visions most nights, and he wanted to ensure that Draco could sleep peacefully without being disturbed by his flailing and screaming. However, they were not completely codependent, and aimed to maintain that balance. Today, Draco and Narcissa were off catching up with everyone at Malfoy Manor, while Harry found himself in the library with Remus. Sirius and Charlie were somewhere in the house, and Harry didn't want to think about that too closely. "Hey, can you take a look at this? It looks interesting," Harry said, handing over his book, which was open to a page about spell chains in dueling. Remus raised an eyebrow, but obliged, his expression brightening as he began to read. "Oh, yes. Have I not taught you this before?" Harry shook his head, and the werewolf frowned. I swear it was on my list." He shrugged and shuffled closer, so they could both read from the book at the same time. "It's fascinating stuff, really, But Harry never got to hear what Remus was about to say. Snape stormed through the door, his anger palpable, like a storm cloud hovering around him, magic practically radiating from his skin. "Severus!" Remus jumped to his feet, alarmed. "What's happened?" Harry narrowed his eyes too. He recalled that the professor had just come from a staff meeting, if he wasn't mistaken. "What's Dumbledore done now?" he asked cautiously. Snape let out a low growl. "Signed my bloody death warrant, that's what he's done," he muttered furiously. Harry looked at Remus in wide-eyed horror. Remus stepped closer to his partner, placing a hand on his shoulder and leaning in. "Calm down, Severus. Start from the beginning," Remus urged, placing a steadying hand on the back of Snape's neck. Snape's posture stiffened, like a bowstring drawn taut, but then he slumped against Remus, at least as much as Snape could manage to slump. Harry felt like an intruder, sitting there and watching them, but he couldn't bring himself to leave. "Today we were introduced to the newest member of the Hogwarts staff," Snape declared, straightening up to regard Remus with a sneer. It was as if they had forgotten Harry was even in the room. Or rather, reintroduced. "Albus has brought back Horace Slughorn." Harry didn't recognize the name, but the reaction it sparked in Remus was immediate. "Slughorn? Merlin, I didn't know he was still around. So, wait, if he's coming back, that means—" Remus glanced at Snape, a look of concern crossing his face, and Snape nodded sharply. "I have finally been granted the position of Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher," he confirmed bitterly. "What?" Harry blurted out, unable to contain his surprise, and both men turned to him, their expressions shifting. Harry was too stunned to feel embarrassed. "I mean, can he do that?" Snape scoffed. "Albus can do whatever he wants at this point," he replied. "But yes, Horace Slughorn was the potions professor when we were in school. He retired shortly after I gained my mastery, which is when I took over, but it seems Albus has convinced him to come out of retirement." "Well, that's not so bad, is it? I mean, at least we'll have a competent defense teacher this year," Harry offered, even if he knew it would make it harder for Snape to keep his cover as a Death Eater while teaching something useful in a class like Dada. "I know the position is cursed or whatever, but not everyone who's taught it has died. Remus is still here." Snape's expression twisted into a scowl. "Unfortunately, that is the least of my problems." He pinched the bridge of his nose, clearly frustrated. "After the staff meeting, Albus asked me to speak with him privately. It seems he has had enough time since that incident with the damned ring to make plans. He knows he is dying, and he knows the Dark Lord wants him dead. He has decided to tie the two together." Snape turned back to Remus, his eyes haunted. "He has made me take a vow to kill him should the opportunity arise, in order to secure my position at the Dark Lord's side." Harry's blood ran cold. "He what?" "Quite," Snape murmured, glancing at Harry. "It seems all my fantasies of permanently wiping that damned twinkle from his eyes have been offered to me, only at the price of my soul." If Snape killed Dumbledore, even if they could prove it was at the headmaster's instruction, he would be vilified forever. There would be no redemption in the eyes of the public. Nothing Harry could say or reveal about Dumbledore would make such an act forgivable by the wizarding world, especially not from a man like Severus Snape. "I won't let that happen," Harry declared firmly. Snape snorted. "I know you manage to pull miracles from thin air on a regular basis, Potter, but even you might struggle to turn this one around. He has forced me into an unbreakable vow. Should Death Eaters attack the school by the end of this year, and he seems alarmingly confident that they will, I am magically obliged to murder him in front of as many people as possible once the opportunity arises. This would terminate my employment, fulfilling the curse on the position, and convincing the Dark Lord that I am loyal only to him." "And perhaps if you were truly loyal to Albus Dumbledore, that might have worked," Harry countered. "But you're forgetting something. There is no way in hell I'm letting Dumbledore control the school for another full year." He smirked, his green eyes flashing. "He's dying regardless. If I can get enough people to publicly lose faith in him while he's trying to secure his legacy will only make him angry, and that anger will lead to mistakes. He's already started making them. His work in the Prophet has been sloppy at best, giving me grounds for legal action. Right now, he doesn't care about Voldemort. He just wants to regain control over me before he dies. That way, when I take down the Dark Lord, everyone will credit it to Dumbledore's fine mentorship," he said, rolling his eyes. "Harry, it's not that simple," Remus began, but Harry shook his head. "I'll kill the headmaster myself before I let him force you into that, Snape," he insisted, watching surprise flicker across Snape's dour face. He flashed his best innocent golden boy grin. "I'm the boy who lived, after all." "And if Albus has done his utmost to make the public think you're the next Dark Lord," Snape retorted sharply. Harry shrugged. "Then I'll bring out the evidence of him turning me into his little magical puppet, play the sad orphan face, and do my best. By that point, I'm pretty confident I can destroy his reputation so thoroughly that the country will just want to sweep the whole thing under the rug to save face." Then he smirked. Besides, your vow might require you to kill him in a public manner. I'm under no such restrictions. I'm sure I can make it look like an accident." The two men stared at him for a long moment, and then Remus shook his head incredulously. "The Slytherins really have claimed you, haven't they?" he sighed, and Harry laughed. "Sorry, Moony. Comes with the family magics, I suppose." He thought about his training with Snape, dating Draco and talking to Salazar. He was doomed from the start, really. "I cannot ask you to kill a man to save my reputation, Harry," Snape insisted, but Harry stared him down unflinchingly. "You're not asking," he replied firmly. "I'm telling you, it's not going to happen. Let my friends and me handle this. Let Amelia and Mrs. Frobisher take the lead. We'll have him out before exams, at the latest." Harry was certain that once he was finished with Dumbledore, the public wouldn't allow him to continue overseeing children. His expression softened as he glanced at Remus, who looked at him in astonishment. "You've already sacrificed so much for Dumbledore, sir," Harry said to Snape. "I'm not going to stand by and let you give him this, too." One day he and Remus would stand together publicly and admit their love. Harry would be damned if Snape was labelled a criminal by the time that day arrived, not after everything Snape had done for him, for the light, and for the entire country. Snape stared at him, utterly silent for a long moment. Harry fought the urge to fidget under his scrutiny, keeping his shoulders squared. "I think," Snape said eventually, his tone difficult to interpret, "it's about time you called me Severus. Only outside of school, of course." Harry gaped at him. Besides Snape, Remus smiled. "I think what Severus is trying to say, Cub, is that he appreciates your support, but let's not rush into thoughts of murdering the headmaster quite so easily." He intertwined his fingers with Snape's, their shoulders brushing together. "Much can happen between now and the end of the year, but I will not let either of you throw yourselves on that bastard's sword." His amber eyes flashed gold, determination radiating from him. "We are a family, and we will figure this out together. For now, all you need to do is prepare for the new school year. Severus, you're welcome to borrow as many of my old lesson plans as you need." Good old Moony, reminding them of what truly mattered, academic preparedness. Harry flashed a quick smile. For what it's worth." "Worth it, Severus," Harry said, the name feeling strange on his tongue. "I'm not sure what this Slughorn fellow is like, but I'm glad you're going to be the new defense teacher. If we're heading into a war, the students need all the preparation they can get, and I know you won't go easy on them." Snape looked faintly amused. "They will all hate me even more than they did in potions," he replied knowingly, which made Harry laugh. "Maybe," Harry said. "Snape would be just as harsh a taskmaster as he was with everything else, and even more biased against Slytherins. But they'll learn a darn sight faster than they would have with another bloody Umbridge involved," he added, realizing that the students would likely be motivated by fear of what Snape might do to them if they failed. A thought struck Harry, and his smirk widened. "Dumbledore's going to expect me to be livid," he realized with delight. "And I'm sure I will have ample opportunity to put you in detention," Snape agreed, catching on as quickly as always. Harry chuckled. "I wonder if he'll ever realize he just did me a massive favor." Dumbledore had declared war, and Harry was more than ready to meet him there. Sirius decided that the order meetings in the last few weeks had become an utter embarrassment. It was a good thing they were a secret vigilante organization, because if they behaved like this in a public forum, no one would take them seriously. He glanced across the table at Remus, who looked equally fed up with the incessant squabbling. Sirius had lost track of what this particular argument was even about. It had started with a fairly reasonable discussion about whether the aura department could be considered trustworthy, but quickly derailed when Tonks mentioned that Harry's visions were the only decent way to get ahead of the Death Eaters these days. Now it seemed there were about 4 arguments happening at once, all stemming from the reliability of using a teenage boy's insight into a Dark Lord's mind as a warning signal. Dumbledore's pointed remarks in The Prophet had certainly made an impact, even though the headmaster himself was being unusually quiet about it. Sirius had expected nothing less. Dumbledore wouldn't allow himself to be seen or heard actively disparaging Harry, especially since he clearly still had plans to rein Harry in. Every time Sirius encountered him lately, Dumbledore had increasingly firm requests to see Harry before school started again. Each time, Sirius told him where to shove it. He was beginning to wonder if he should just kick the whole order out of his house and be done with it. As tempting as that sounded, he knew Harry wouldn't approve. They needed to understand what Dumbledore was up to, which meant at least some of them had to stay on his good side. But despite knowing his godson meant well in wanting him to maintain semi-decent terms with the headmaster, Sirius was entirely ready to punch the old man in the face. "I think that is enough for today," Dumbledore declared over the chaos, waiting for silence to settle. "As difficult as it is to trust Harry's visions, considering their origins, we must continue to take advantage of this information, at least for now, while it seems to be accurate." Sirius silently snarled. Was he suggesting that Harry might soon start giving them false information? With the meeting dismissed, everyone began to disperse. Sirius turned to Charlie, ready to leave, when he heard his name called in that infuriatingly calm voice. "Yes, Albus?" he asked through gritted teeth, forcing a smile at the elderly headmaster. Dumbledore reached into a pocket of his robes and pulled out a thick envelope. "I'm afraid I had some trouble addressing young Harry's book list, so I thought it might be easier to hand it over in person." He chuckled quietly. "Or as close to it, given that you've kept Harry tucked away so safely all summer. Here," he said, handing over the letter. "I trust you will make sure this gets to him." "Make sure it gets to him in time. Please do send him my regards, won't you?" Sirius took the letter, feeling a tingle in his fingers from the magic infused in the parchment. He fought back a scowl. "I'll pass it on," he confirmed. Dumbledore smiled warmly, clasping his hands together. "Wonderful. Well, I shall see you at the next meeting, then." He left without even asking Sirius for a meeting with Harry, which felt even more suspicious. Charlie lingered in the doorway, concern etched across his face. Sirius jerked his head toward the stairs. He wasn't going anywhere until he had a proper look at that letter. "Trouble addressing it my arse," he muttered once they were safely tucked away in the drawing room. "Trouble seeing the address, more like." Harry had no issues receiving mail from anyone else. Even his OWL results had arrived just fine. The only way Dumbledore would have had trouble was if he were trying to decipher the address of the unplottable building through the magic of sending school letters. "Do I need to call Bill back?" Charlie asked, but Sirius shook his head and drew his wand. "Nah, I think I know what this is." He had grown up with incredibly paranoid parents. Sirius knew what tracking charms felt like. Sure enough, a few diagnostic spells revealed at least 4 different trackers embedded in the letter, and with a growl he dismantled them all. Charlie edged closer, his chest pressing against Sirius's shoulder as he eyed the parchment warily. "Should we open it and copy it for Harry, or—" "I don't think that's necessary." Sirius didn't sense any other magic on it. If Dumbledore had any additional trackers, they were unlike anything he had encountered before, and he had seen a lot. Besides, Look at that thing." He glanced down at the envelope, a proud grin spreading across his face. "If I'm not mistaken, there's a badge in there." Charlie's eyes widened. Sirius felt Charlie lean in closer, his warmth pressing against Sirius's back.
"You think Quidditch captain?" Charlie asked, his excitement palpable. "Unless they've taken away your brother's prefect badge," Sirius replied with a snort. He planted a quick kiss on Charlie's cheek, picked up the envelope, and extended his hand. "Let's go give this to Harry so we can find out, yeah?" Charlie grinned, their fingers intertwining, and together they apparated home. As they stepped through the wards, Sirius felt no sense of alarm, nothing like the warnings that had triggered at Grimmauld with all those tracking spells. He smirked to himself. "Take that, Dumbledore." The sound of laughter and splashing caught their attention, and they paused, turning away from the path to the front door and heading around to the back by the pool. It seemed the boys were making the most of the glorious sunshine, though Sirius was willing to bet Draco had a strong sunblock charm protecting that fair skin of his. Narcissa was there too, elegantly sprawled in a sun lounger at the edge of the pool, wearing a swimsuit and engrossed in a book, while the boys tossed a beach ball back and forth. "Well, this looks like much more fun than what we were having at Grimmauld," he greeted them, smirking at the trio. "Remus and Severus not joining you?" "Severus is brewing," Harry replied, still stumbling over the man's first name. Sirius could relate. He often forgot it himself. "Mooney said he might come out in a bit, but he's heading down to the lab for a while first," Harry added, making a slight face that made Sirius fight back a smile. His poor pup was grappling with the active love lives of the adults around him. To be fair, Sirius had struggled with the concept of Mooney and Severus for a while, but after living with the two for a bit, he had come to terms with it. After all this time, especially those teenage years spent with Remus, learning far too much about his preferences while he was drunk, Sirius was just happy to see his friends smiling. He was equally relieved that their antics were confined to places he didn't usually frequent. That was more than he could say for his godson and Draco, who were getting a bit too handsy all over the house. Teenagers. "Well, I've got a present for you, pup," he announced, waving the envelope dramatically. "Mayhem, did your book list arrive?" Draco made a face at the nickname, still unsure about it. "This morning," he confirmed, a slight frown crossing his face. "Nothing for Harry, though. That was strange." Dumbledore was having trouble getting tracking charms to stick on something going to an unplottable property, Charlie chimed in wryly, as Harry pulled himself out of the water, pushing his wet hair back off his face. It warmed Sirius's heart to see the teenager looking so healthy, even with all those scars on his back and legs. He was as tall as Charlie now. "He decided to have me deliver it personally," Sirius added, handing over the envelope once Harry had cast a drying charm on himself. Wandless, too, the little powerhouse. "Don't worry, I dismantled all the charms before I came home." "I could have just copied off Draco's list. It'll all be the same," Harry said, frowning slightly. "You should have just burned the damn thing." Sirius smirked to himself. "Don't be so hasty there, kiddo." His suspicions were confirmed when Harry peeked into the envelope, his eyes widening as he pulled out a small red Quidditch captain badge, looking utterly awestruck. But it should be Katie's," he protested, staring at the badge. "What is it?" Draco asked, stepping out of the pool and striding over. "Oh." He glanced at the badge, then broke into a grin. "Congratulations, Scarhead. You won't need me to sneak you into the prefect's meetings anymore. Bathroom anymore." Sirius could have done without hearing that. "But it should be Katie's. She's been on the team longer. I was banned last year," Harry protested. Only because of Umbridge, Draco pointed out, rolling his eyes. Maybe Katie turned it down. Look, there's a letter in there too. Sirius watched as Harry properly emptied the envelope, tossing aside the book list, which Charlie caught and pocketed for later, and focusing on another piece of parchment attached. "It's from Professor McGonagall," Harry explained, shock still evident in his voice. "Well, it's from Katie, passed through McGonagall. She says McGonagall offered her the captaincy, but she turned it down to focus on her newts, and—" he looked up, a slight smile on his face. "She says getting into professional Quidditch will be easier if I have 2 years as captain under my belt instead of just 1.
But she's happy to help me out if I end up really busy with everything again." Sirius wasn't the only one who snorted at that. "All my other stuff" was quite the understatement. "You've earned that badge, Harry," Draco insisted. "You're the reason Gryffindor wins as often as it does. You deserve it." "He's right, kid," Charlie chimed in. "I've talked enough Quidditch strategy with you to know you'll be a brilliant captain. And if you ever need advice, you can take your pick from me, Ollie, or Angie." He flashed that dimpled smile that Sirius loved, and Harry grinned back. "Quidditch captain," he murmured, looking down at his badge. Sirius clapped him on the shoulder. "Proud of you, kiddo," he said, his heart swelling with affection as he watched his godson's face light up. "And hey, now that I'm a free man, I'll be able to come see you play." He hadn't watched Harry in a Quidditch match since that disastrous game in his 3rd year, when the Dementors had swarmed him. "Really?" Harry asked, his voice filled with hope. The look of surprise on his face tugged at Sirius's heart. It hurt him a little to see Harry so taken aback that he might actually want to come and support him. "Every game Dumbledore will let me," Sirius vowed earnestly. With any luck, he'd have Harry's entire career to watch him play Quidditch, but he wanted to start as early as possible. He'd missed enough matches as it was. After the book lists arrived, it was decided that Harry and Draco would take separate trips to Diagon Alley for safety reasons. Harry couldn't really argue with that. He and Sirius already attracted enough attention as it was, without adding Draco and Narcissa to the mix. Diagon Alley was a dark place these days, and Harry just wanted to get in and out as quickly as possible. So he went first, accompanied by Sirius and Remus, apparating into the alley on a slightly grey afternoon. There wasn't much that Harry needed, really. Snape, Severus, Merlin, he'd never get used to that, had assured them he would take care of both boys' potion ingredients, and Harry could have ordered all the books and writing supplies he needed by owl. However, he did need new Hogwarts robes, thanks to what he suspected was his final growth spurt, and that could only be done at Malkin's. Besides, Remus had said it would be good for morale if people saw Harry out shopping for his school things. But now that he was in Diagon Alley, Harry wasn't so sure about that. The alley was certainly different. The first thing Harry noticed was how empty it was. The few people who were there walked quickly, keeping their heads down. No one stopped to chat or called cheerful greetings. Then he realized how many of the shops were closed. He'd heard, of course. The Trins had told him about Fortescue shutting down just days before someone smashed up the shop, and it had been in the Prophet when Ollivander mysteriously vanished one night. Even Luna wasn't sure where her great-grandfather was, and Harry knew the Ravenclaw was usually in the know about such things. Harry felt a pang of worry as they walked further down the street. It seemed that shop owners had decided it was too risky to stay open, fearing that Voldemort and his followers might take offense. "It's just like the First War all over again," Sirius murmured grimly, placing a reassuring hand on Harry's shoulder as they hurried toward Flourish and Blots. Fortunately, the bookshop was still open, though the only other customers were Hogwarts students. They quickly purchased Harry's new books,
and then made their way to Malkin's for his measurements. The usually chatty witch was almost silent as she worked, her face etched with worry and her eyes darting anxiously toward the door. Not once did she meet Harry's gaze during the entire visit. It struck Harry how, despite the reduced number of people in the alley, everyone seemed wary of him. It hurt to realize how deeply Dumbledore's influence had affected them, how easily they had been convinced that he was under some sort of dark influence. Harry tried to shake off the feeling. It helped to remember that he had plenty of support. But the weight of it lingered. It was going to be a challenging start to the school year if everyone viewed him as dangerous again. To lift their spirits and pass the time while Madame Malkin worked on Harry's robes, the three of them decided to visit Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. It was easily the busiest shop in the entire alley. There was something to be said for seeking laughter in a time of fear. The twins seemed a bit starstruck at having both remaining marauders in their shop at once, practically tripping over themselves to show Sirius and Remus some of their new products. Harry hung back with Angelina near the till, watching the scene unfold with amusement. "Congrats on the badge, by the way, Captain," she teased, grinning at him. Harry felt himself blush. "Katie told you?" "When she gave the letter to McGonagall to pass to you, yeah. She made it sound like a big deal." "Promise me you won't tell until you get the badge," Angelina said with a wink. "Didn't want to ruin the surprise." "I'm just glad I get to play again, let alone captain the team," Harry replied, relief washing over him. He had truly worried that the Ministry would find a way to keep Umbridge's ban in place, just to spite him for making them look bad. "You'll do great," Angelina assured him. "You've got a lot of work ahead of you, but at least you're not rebuilding the entire team." He still had Katie, Vicky, and even Ginny on his side. "I have every faith you'll keep the Gryffindor win streak going." Her gaze turned devilish, and she smirked. "You'll have me and Ollie to answer to if you don't." Harry snorted. "Aye, Captain. I'll do my best." "Just do me a favour and don't put those idiot beaters from the Ravenclaw match back on the team," Angelina added, making a face. "I might not have much choice," he admitted. If no one even halfway decent tried out, he'd be in trouble. Just then the four troublemakers returned to the till, Sirius with a basket overflowing with prank goods, while Remus carried a much more manageable stack. Harry's eyes widened as he stared at the pile, while the twins began ringing everything through. "I am so glad I'm heading back to school soon," he declared, and Sirius barked out a laugh. "What do you mean, pup? This is all just stuff to get you and your boyfriend with before you leave again." Sirius's grey eyes sparkled with mischief, even as he attempted to maintain an innocent expression. Harry eyed him warily. "You sure that's a war you want to start, Padfoot?" he asked. Sirius's smirk widened. "Try us, mischief." Well, Harry couldn't say he hadn't warned him. He turned to the twins, who were watching the exchange with barely concealed glee. "Okay, boys, help me out here." "Give me your best stuff," Harry called out. He was met with identical smirks as George grabbed him by the arm and pulled him into the back room. Harry could have sworn he heard Sirius cursing in the background, while Remus just chuckled. Despite the regular nighttime trips into Voldemort's mind, Harry was beginning to enjoy his routine at Seren. With Sirius free and no one expecting him to spend part of his summer elsewhere, it was shaping up to be his best summer yet. The Death Eaters seemed to be slowing down their attacks, growing frustrated with how quickly the Order managed to mobilize against them each time. Lately, most of Harry's visions consisted of the Dark Lord torturing his own followers. Of course, not everything could go according to plan, not for Harry Potter. So when he saw an owl speeding toward him as he and Draco finished playing Quidditch, his stomach dropped. "I know that owl," Draco said, narrowing his gaze. "Whose is it?"
Harry squinted up at the approaching bird, frowning. It was definitely familiar, but not one he could immediately place. It wasn't until the owl was just a few feet away that recognition hit him, and his stomach sank further. "It's Sully's," he realized, extending his arm for the owl to land on. It was a small creature, trying to be gentle as it delivered its message with urgency. Why was Sullivan writing to him? Harry opened the letter, dread building with every line. "Harry, I need help. My parents have joined him. They don't want me marked yet, but they want me doing his bidding and are planning to present me to him tomorrow. Can you get me out of here? ASAP. I'm worried about what will happen if they take me to him. Everyone knows I'm friends with you. Sully." "Fuck," Harry muttered, looking up at Draco with panic in his eyes. "We have to get him out of there." If Sullivan's parents took him to Voldemort, the Dark Lord could easily break through his occlumency barriers. Harry felt the weight of urgency settle over him as he prepared to communicate with Sullivan. "How?" he asked, glancing at the owl perched on his shoulder. The bird seemed to expect an answer as the two boys hurried back toward the house. Harry was aware that Tonks was the only one home. Sirius and Remus were out on order business, Snape and Charlie were both at work, and Narcissa was over at Malfoy Manor. Tonks was only supposed to be there for a short while, just hanging out after a training session to let the boys fly without breaking any rules. "Tonks!" Harry called out, hoping the aura wasn't about to leave. "Tonks, where are you?" Tonks rushed in from the kitchen, wand raised warily. He blinked at the sight of the two teens and the owl. "What's the matter?" "The Foleys have turned dark," Draco said grimly. Harry pressed on. "You know my friend Sullivan?" Tonks nodded, and Harry continued. "He just wrote, he needs sanctuary as fast as possible. His parents want to take him to meet Voldemort tomorrow." Tonks swore under his breath, and Harry could almost see him mentally shifting into aura mode, his shoulders tensing as if he were preparing for a duel. "Bugger, right. We can't just go in and get him ourselves without risking everything getting worse." He shot a warning look at Harry, who couldn't even be completely offended. Rescuing Sullivan in person had been on his list of options too. "Is that his owl?" Tonks asked. "Yeah, it's waiting for a reply." Tonks nodded, glancing frantically around the hallway. Then he dug into his pocket and pulled out a chocolate frog card. "Portus." The card glowed, and he held it out to Harry. "Send him this. It'll take him to the pottery wards when he says your name. I'll take you over there to wait for him." He glanced at Draco. "Are you okay to wait here? The others will worry if they come home to an empty house." Draco gave a short nod. Harry summoned some writing supplies, quickly scrawling an explanation and tucking the note into the owl's leg. Harry carefully tucked the card into the envelope and attached it to the little owl's leg, hurrying over to the still-open front door. "Fly quickly," he murmured, watching as the owl took off into the bright blue sky. Turning back to the others, he frowned, realizing he had no idea where Sully lived or how long it might take. "We should eat something and head over there," he suggested. Tonks nodded in agreement. "I was just about to call you in anyway. Kerry made lunch," she replied. As they headed for the kitchen, Draco reached out, catching Harry's hand and bringing it to his lips. "Be careful, won't you?" he said softly. Harry smiled reassuringly. "We'll be fine." He had faith that Sully wouldn't let the portkey fall into the wrong hands. Hours passed as Harry and Tonks waited outside the gates of the pottery. Harry was a little surprised that Tonks didn't switch back to her usual female form, but he didn't ask. As long as she was comfortable, that was all that mattered to him.
They chatted to pass the time, but both frequently checked their watches, shifting anxiously from foot to foot. Finally, a burst of colour caught their attention, and Sully appeared, clutching the chocolate frog card in his hand and a backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked pale, his dark eyes filled with relief. "Thank you," he gasped, grabbing Harry in a tight hug. Harry hugged him back, feeling the younger boy nearly collapse against him. "You're safe," he promised. It took a moment for Sullivan to gather himself, stepping back with a deep breath. He glanced around, looking confused. "Tonks?" he asked, and the aura grinned. Sully's eyes widened slightly as he took in Tonks's masculine form. "You look great." There was a strange edge to his tone that made Harry tense, but the look in Tonks' eyes was almost sympathetic. "Where are we?" Sully asked, peering around in confusion, clearly unable to see the house. "Oh, the pottery is located on the northeast edge of Thetford Forest," Harry explained. The boy gasped, turning quickly to gaze at the manor as the open gates suddenly came into view. "Come on, let's get you settled in." "The Goldsteins have turned too," Sully said as they walked down the drive. "Anthony's pretending to be a sleeper agent. He won't get marked, not when he can act like he's on the light side. I wouldn't have either, but Anthony's better at occupancy than I am, and he knows less. I talk to Luna a lot," he added for clarity. Harry nodded, understanding the weight of Sully's words, though they left a sour taste in his stomach. Anthony might not know as much as Sully, but he still had enough insight into Harry's personal life and his history with Dumbledore. Harry just hoped Voldemort wouldn't feel the need to press Anthony for information. "So we need to be careful about what we say around Anthony from now on," he said, grimacing. Sully nodded in agreement. A sudden thought struck Harry. "Do the Death Eaters know you're aware of the Goldsteins? If they were counting on Anthony as a sleeper agent, they wouldn't be pleased to learn that Sully had spilled the beans. That could lead to a change in Anthony's assignment, or something much worse." Fortunately, Sully shook his head. "No, I don't think so. Anthony sent me a letter because he overheard my dad talking to his dad about Death Eater stuff." "All right, then we'll keep treating Anthony like normal," Harry decided. They would need to spread the word discreetly. He wondered if Draco still had any of his password-protected ink, or if he would have to ask the twins for more. Anthony's idea to lay low and play the role of a Death Eater was noble, but Harry needed to ensure his friend knew there were other options. When they arrived at the pottery, the residents were surprised to see Harry, but Tinker quickly appeared and went to fetch Theo. The Slytherin, being Harry's closest friend, was always a welcome sight. Among the residents, Theo had become the unofficial welcome wizard for any newcomers. "Sullivan!" he exclaimed in surprise from the top of the stairs, hurrying down to meet the trio. "What happened?" Sully quickly explained the situation, and Theo's expression darkened. "He's going after the peripheral families, then. That means he's run out of known dark families to ask." Harry doubted there was much asking involved. "That's not a good sign," he said, his thoughts racing. How many other kids at Hogwarts might find their families turning to Voldemort? How many would be caught up in all of this? "I'll send Susan a letter. She'll know what to do," Theo said resolutely. Sully perked up. "We can still write to people from here?" he asked, his voice full of hope. To Harry's surprise, it was Tonks who replied. "As long as you trust them," she confirmed, then winked. "You can still write to me, don't worry." When did Sully and Tonks start corresponding? Sure, Harry had seen them chatting at his birthday party, but he shook his head. This wasn't the time to dwell on that. "I need to get back before people start to worry," Harry said, glancing at his watch.
Sirius and Remus would probably be home by now. If he didn't return soon, Draco might come after him, apparition license or not. "Theo, are you good to show Sully around?" "Yeah, no problem," Theo replied, clapping the Ravenclaw on the shoulder and offering a small smile. "Come on, you look like you could use something to eat." Some of the tension began to seep from Sullivan's shoulders, and he returned Harry's gaze with a grin that was only slightly strained. "Thanks for all this, Harry. I don't think I could do what Anthony's doing." "Happy to help," Harry said with a shrug. "We'll figure out what to do about Anthony later. Let's see what Susan says." He was glad to leave such decisions to her. After all, she was the strategy master of their group. They exchanged goodbyes, and Harry headed back, the weight of the situation heavy on his mind. As they said their goodbyes, Tonks affectionately ruffled Sully's hair before they made their way to the edge of the wards to apparate home. "I didn't know you and Sully were friends," Harry remarked, and Tonks smiled in response. "Sully's a good kid," he replied. "He just needs a bit of help figuring some things out. But we're getting there." Harry blinked in surprise, then shook his head slightly, leaning into Tonks's side as they prepared to apparate. Again he reminded himself that it was none of his business. In the potions lab, 5 cauldrons simmered away, and Severus went over his mental checklist, wondering if he had time to start anything else before lunch. "Remind me again why you're doing this and not Slughorn?" Remus asked from his usual chair in the corner, amusement evident in his furrowed brows. Severus scowled. "Because Horace has been retired for 15 years, and I don't trust his ability to brew more than 1 cauldron at a time," he replied evenly. This was all standard stock for the hospital wing, and he wanted to ensure it was up to par, especially with the year ahead looking so challenging. He anticipated many of his Slytherins would end up under Pomfrey's care, and he'd be damned if he let them receive inferior medication. Remus snorted quietly. "Albus might make questionable decisions, but I'm sure he wouldn't hire Slughorn back to teach potions if he wasn't still competent." "Debatable," Severus shot back, levitating some powdered bicorn horn with his wand. He carefully ensured the exact amount entered each cauldron simultaneously, turning the liquid inside a vivid red. He reversed the direction of the stirring rods, his keen eyes monitoring every cauldron. "I don't believe that getting me into the defense position was Dumbledore's only reason for hiring that old social climber." He noticed Remus's gaze narrow. "What do you mean?" Severus paused, considering how to phrase his thoughts without alarming his partner. "There are other potions masters who would... Quite a few would happily take a position teaching at Hogwarts, even in the current political climate. They wouldn't be as high maintenance as Horace Slughorn." Remus's expression drew a soft snort from Severus. Both men remembered all too well Slughorn's tendency to ingratiate himself with any student he thought might lead to something he could profit from. He was a passable brewer, but Severus knew better. There were far more competent masters who wouldn't insist on collecting students like trophies. "But what could Albus gain from bringing Horace back?" Remus asked, pausing for a moment. "You think it's about his Wizengamot seat, perhaps?" "That's likely part of it," Severus agreed, adjusting the heat beneath his cauldrons. However, Horace taught for a very long time before his retirement, almost as long as Albus, in fact. His lips thinned. Long enough to have taught young Tom Riddle. Remus, quick to pick up on the implications, looked at him in alarm. "You think he knows something?" "I think Albus suspects he knows something," Severus replied. Albus was currently Horcrux hunting. The incident with the ring had made that abundantly clear.
Bringing back Horace Slughorn was no coincidence, and I believe Albus hopes that the chance to teach Harry Potter himself will be enough to loosen the man up and encourage him to share his knowledge. A faint growl emerged from Remus's throat, sending a prickle of something that was neither fear nor arousal down Severus's spine. He would need to address his inappropriate reactions to his partner's wolf noises someday. "Should we be worried about Harry?" Remus asked, concern evident in his voice. Severus shook his head. "I've told him to try and stay in Horace's good graces. If he can, he should find out whatever it is Albus is after. But he'll be fine. He has sensible friends, even if he sometimes defaults back to being an idiot Gryffindor." He smirked slightly. "Draco will keep him in line." Severus wasn't worried about Harry Potter, at least not when it came to Horace Slughorn. Remus chuckled. "I suppose, poor bloke, having to deal with a slug club," he teased, laughing as Severus visibly shuddered at the mere mention of the name. So much of his school days had been wasted while that insufferable lech tried to draw him into one lucrative potion scheme after another. "If it gets us a step above Albus, it'll be worth it." Harry could handle it. He was used to people trying to manipulate him for his fame. Finally, Severus managed to add the last of his ingredients to the cauldrons, employing a tricky bit of magic to ensure everything was added at perfect intervals, identical in each one. He could feel Remus's gaze on his back, still impressed even after witnessing Severus perform this feat 1,000 times. Yet it still made a flicker of pride flutter in his stomach. "I still don't see why you're taking on this workload," Remus sighed. "You're the defense teacher now. This isn't your responsibility." "Technically it is," Severus countered, striding over to lean against the wall beside Remus. "Albus left the provision for the school optional in Horace's contract. I suppose the old slug refused to spend his summer slaving away in a lab." He sneered to himself. "Anything Horace chooses not to brew gets passed on to me, and as you can see, Horace chose not to brew anything at all." Not that Severus would have let him brew for the school anyway. He had told Remus that he didn't trust the man to make so much as a pepper-up potion in bulk. "Bastard," Remus muttered with a faint scowl. "Merlin forbid I have anything else to do with my summer," Severus agreed wryly. Remus smirked, his arm sneaking around Severus's waist, pulling him closer until Severus stood right in front of him. "Little does he know," Remus teased, his amber eyes sparkling with mischief. "How much longer do these have left?" Severus didn't even glance back at his cauldrons to check on their progress. 12 minutes, he replied, raising an eyebrow at his partner. One hand rested on the back of Remus's neck as he leaned in just a bit closer. "You don't have to stay down here if you're bored." "I'm not bored," Remus assured him, arching into the touch. "But no one else is home, and I was hoping to take advantage of that opportunity to do something other than watch you brew." His gaze turned intent, and Severus felt a flutter of anticipation in his chest. "We have the house to ourselves for at least another 2 hours, Severus said, glancing around as if to confirm their solitude. For once, everyone else had managed to schedule their activities all on the same day. He bent down just enough to plant a soft kiss on Remus's eager lips. "Be patient, Wolf," he drawled, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "I assure you it will be worth it." Remus let out a tiny whine as Severus pulled back, chasing his lips with a hopeful expression. Severus fought the urge to give in. If they got distracted now, the last hour and a half of work would be wasted. 11 minutes, he reminded himself. They could control themselves for 11 minutes. Chapter 84. It was one of those rare occasions when Harry and Snape trained together, without Draco or anyone else around. With only a few days left before returning to school, Snape was pushing Harry to his limits, ensuring they had covered every possible angle. Not that their lessons would end once school started. Harry fully expected a series of detentions in his future, but there were certain spells Snape wouldn't risk, even in the Chamber of Secrets. After a full summer of relentless training, Harry was beginning to see the benefits. These days, when dueling against Snape, he found himself winning as often as he lost. However, this wasn't one of those victories. As he blinked his eyes open, he realized he was lying on the floor, with Snape standing over him, a faint smirk on his face. Harry huffed, but accepted the hand offered to help him up. "That frustration will get you nowhere," Snape warned. While Harry was getting better at using the man's first name in conversation, he would always think of him as Snape. "Remember, your duel with the Dark Lord is not likely to last as long as I have been training you." "But how many people will I have to fight to get to him?" Harry shot back, running a hand through his hair. "Should the battle go as planned, not nearly as many as you seem to expect." Snape gave him a pointed look. "We are not sending you out onto a battlefield alone, Potter." Harry understood that, but he also hated the idea of any of his friends stepping between him and a Death Eater's wand. "It still doesn't feel like enough," he insisted. "I mean, I know you're one of Voldemort's best, but if I can't even guarantee a win against you—" He clenched his teeth in frustration. "He's going to be so much more ruthless than even you will be." He knew Snape was dueling him as if he were a loyal Death Eater, but the man couldn't deny that he was still treating this as a training exercise, not a proper battle. "Look at me, Potter." Harry's gaze snapped up automatically, a reflex honed by years spent in the classroom with this man. Snape's dark eyes bore into him with an intensity that was hard to ignore. "You are capable of defeating the Dark Lord." His voice was clear and curt, filled with unwavering conviction. Harry stared at him in disbelief. "You may have seen him duel Albus Dumbledore and been impressed, but we both know that neither of them was truly aiming to kill in that encounter. They were trying to intimidate. You've witnessed how the Dark Lord fights when his emotions get the better of him. He becomes sloppy, foolish, far too arrogant. There's a reason he surrounds himself with powerful, competent fighters. Those fighters will be occupied elsewhere when the final battle arrives." Snape smirked slowly. "If nothing else, letting the Dark Lord know you have destroyed all his Horcruxes will surely rattle him long enough for you to finish him off." Harry wished he could share that level of confidence. "Provided we have destroyed all his Horcruxes by then," he countered. "We don't even know how many are left." "As I told you, I suspect Albus knows the answer to that. Or at the very least, he knows someone who might." Snape had already hinted at his suspicions regarding Slughorn, and Harry felt at a loss about how he was supposed to get the man to like him enough to share such sensitive information. Snape seemed to think it would be easy. "That's the other half of my problem, though," Harry burst out. "Dumbledore has been trying to get to me all summer, and now I'm walking right back into his clutches. He's going to make my life hell as it is, without me trying to ingratiate myself with Slughorn right in front of him." Snape didn't appear bothered in the slightest. "Albus is dying," he said bluntly. "He knows his time is limited. The manipulations that matter to Dumbledore now are the ones that will solidify his legacy, not with the Wizengamot, or even as headmaster of Hogwarts, but as the mentor of the boy who lived, the one who will defeat the Dark Lord. His gossip in The Prophet is all part of his plan to portray himself as the kindly, concerned guardian trying to save a poor young man from the clutches of darkness. Either he will succeed by having you kill Voldemort, or he will fail, and the public will rally behind him against a new threat. You."
Harry's stomach twisted at the thought of Dumbledore manipulating the public so thoroughly that they genuinely believed he might turn dark. Sometimes it felt like they were already halfway there. But surely he knows I won't just stand by and let him claim he mentored me. No, he expects you to die in the battle to release the Horcrux in your skull, remember? Snape shot back sharply. Then he can claim whatever he wants before he dies. Worse, if he dies by my hand, which he fully expects, he won't even need to claim anything, because the public will create the narrative for him. I'm not letting that happen, Harry responded instinctively, earning a piercing glare from Snape. Yes, because the story of you killing Albus is so much better, Snape replied sarcastically. No, but the story that comes from me revealing everything he's done to me is, Harry insisted, refusing to back down. He had more optimism than Snape, at least when it came to changing public opinion about Dumbledore. Amelia and Mrs. Frobisher were working on it. As long as you are careful, Harry, Snape said, and Harry was never quite sure how to react when Snape's voice softened like that, the same tone he used when speaking to Draco. I will be, Harry promised, but being careful with Dumbledore won't get me very far if I can't defeat Voldemort when the time comes. Duel me again? Snape stared at him for a moment, then sighed. With a reluctant nod, he drew his wand. Lying under a blanket on a conjured futon in the back garden of Seren, staring up at the stars with Draco curled up beside him, Harry felt he had discovered the true definition of perfection. It was a beautiful, cloudless night, surprisingly warm even though the sun had long set. The whole setup was Draco's idea, teasing Harry about his astronomy grade and claiming he spent too much time indoors to recognize the stars anymore. They had created their little haven, complete with hot chocolate delivered by Kerry, making it the closest thing to a date night they could manage while at Seren. Harry pressed a gentle kiss to Draco's hair, his hand running softly up and down the blonde's side. This was a really good idea, he murmured, feeling Draco's smile against his collarbone. It was, wasn't it? Draco replied, a hint of smugness in his voice. His fingers curled slightly around Harry's hip, just beneath the hem of his t-shirt. I'm glad the weather worked out for us. I was worried we'd only have cloudy days before we had to go back to Hogwarts. Harry sighed quietly. The thought of school approaching loomed too close for his liking. I don't want to go back, he confessed. I wish we could just stay here until I turn 17. Then he would have his full adult power and could finally confront both Voldemort and Dumbledore. But there was work to be done in the meantime. Quit being such a pessimist, Potter, Draco scolded lightly. This year won't be nearly as bad as the last. No Umbridge, no awful exams, and a reason to stick it to Dumbledore. Not to mention, we won't have to pretend to hate each other anymore. Thanks to Narcissa's bold moves over the summer, everyone knew the Malfoys were on the side of the light, and that Narcissa and Sirius had reconnected as family. I'm looking forward to that part, Harry agreed with a slight smile, gently pulling Draco up to kiss him. Maybe we'll be out properly before the end of the year, Harry said, his heart aching with desire for that to happen. But he wouldn't wish for it at the cost of Draco's safety. We'll see how it goes, Draco replied, pressing their foreheads together. Harry felt the edges of his glasses digging into his cheek, but he didn't mind at all. There are a lot of good things ahead. Even Dumbledore can't ruin that. I suppose, Harry found it hard to focus on his worries, with Draco winding his fingers through his hair and trailing kisses down his jaw.
Their conversation took a back seat as they kissed lazily, Harry melting beneath Draco's gentle touch. Their caresses weren't meant to ignite passion. They were aware their guardians were still in the house and could peek out at any moment. But Harry found himself arching into Draco, longing to get even closer, to envelop himself in the scent, warmth and love of his boyfriend. Draco carefully removed Harry's glasses, wanting to kiss him better, and Harry grinned playfully. "How will I see the stars now?" he asked, prompting a snort of laughter from Draco. "You gave up on the stars ages ago," Draco teased. "But if you want to go back to them, by all means." Harry whined, pressing his lips against Draco's to silence that smirk. Eventually they settled back down, determined to enjoy the beauty of the night sky. "I'll admit," Harry said after a long silence, "I'm glad that this time I'm leaving Sirius a free man. He won't be trapped alone in Grimmauld." That had been one of his greatest worries the previous year, constantly watching for the shadows in his godfather's eyes during their mirror conversations. Even if he was still on the run, he wouldn't be alone, Draco pointed out. Harry hummed in agreement. That was true. Narcissa and Remus were planning to stick around, and of course there was... "Even better," Charlie said with a smile, thinking about Sirius and Charlie. He remembered how perplexed he had been by the unlikely couple at the beginning of summer. Now he couldn't imagine either of them with anyone else. They just worked. "I never thought I'd see him as happy as he is with Charlie." "They are certainly smitten," Draco agreed. "The only worry you should have about leaving your godfather to go to school is the possibility of them eloping while you're gone." Harry laughed quietly. Padfoot wouldn't do that. He'd never miss an excuse for a party. When he and Charlie got married, it would be an event, not an elopement. Draco hummed, conceding the point. "Well, it's one less line for you to provide an heir for, at any rate," he remarked, "which can only be a good thing, considering how many houses you've got to your name." Harry tensed slightly. He hadn't thought about it that way. Any children Sirius had would be more direct black heirs than he would be. Oh. He bit his lip anxiously, staring up at the twinkling stars. "I mean, it wouldn't be so bad to have enough kids for each house, would it?" His hand settled on the small of Draco's back. "And the Malfoy line, of course. 4 is a pretty reasonable number. 5 if Sirius and Charlie don't have kids." Not that he could see that happening. Charlie wasn't shy about voicing his hope to be a father in the future. "That's 4 times we'd have to find someone willing to carry for us," Draco pointed out, his tone frustratingly even. Harry tilted his head, looking Draco in the eyes. "But would you want to? If we could?" They had never really spoken about kids before. Harry held his breath, waiting for a response. I hated being an only child," Draco said eventually. "Father was only interested in securing an heir. Once he did that, he was satisfied. And most pure-blood families have trouble carrying to term these days. All the inbreeding, I suppose. My mother's pregnancy with me was difficult. I don't think they wanted to risk a second." Harry noticed Draco swallow hard. "I always expected to be married off to someone who would only want the same, an heir to the Malfoy line, and nothing else." "I'd have a whole Quidditch team of kids if we could manage it," Harry blurted out, unable to keep the thought to himself any longer. He turned his gaze back to the stars, not wanting to risk seeing Draco's judgment. "I know we probably won't, though I bet there are plenty of women who would happily carry for the boy who lived, but I don't care about heirs or lines or any of that. I love kids, Draco. Can we, do you... Draco cut him off with a firm kiss, and the knot of tension in Harry's chest began to unravel. "As many as you want, Potter," he promised, grinning against Harry's lips. Harry sucked in a sharp breath. "Really?" "We can certainly afford it," Draco pointed out. "The only thing I know about being a father is what not to do, but I'll learn. I want to learn." He pulled back, a smirk playing on his lips. "I'd have more kids than the Weasleys with you if we could." "Maybe we could adopt some," Harry suggested. "Orphans, like I was." Just like Tom Riddle had once been. Kids who deserved to be shown what a family really was. "Magical orphans with no other family are rare, but I'm not averse to it," Draco replied. "And Pansy has already agreed to carry at least one for me. Granted, we made that deal when we expected to be betrothed to each other, but she's told me she'll still honour it, as long as I agree to father a Parkinson heir for her, should she manage to avoid marrying. Not the traditional way," he added hastily, noticing the alarm on Harry's face. "With spells." "Oh." Harry frowned, confused. "Does Pansy not think she'll get married then?" Harry asked, unsure of Pansy's situation. He didn't know much about her, but was aware she wasn't dating anyone. "If Pansy marries, it'll be out of expectation or financial security," Draco replied. "She doesn't do relationships or sex or anything like that. The Muggles have a word for it, she told me. Asexual, I think she called it." Harry recalls seeing books with that title back at Infinite. "Oh, but she's always so flirty." "She thinks it's fun. It's a power play thing," Draco said with a vague gesture. "People will do a lot for you if they think they'll get something in return, especially if they think they might get sex out of it. I keep telling her it might backfire one day, but she doesn't care. Her mother taught her a castration charm when we were teenagers because adult men started leching on her." Harry shuddered. "She would have been happy to marry me if we'd been forced into it. I wouldn't expect anything from her like that. And she likes the idea of being a mother. So we agreed that unless she was forced into another betrothal contract, I would father the Parkinson heir for her to raise unwed. A bit scandalous, but not the end of the world." "Is she likely to be betrothed to someone else?" Harry asked, a hint of horror in his voice. He knew marriage contracts were a pure-blood thing, but they seemed utterly barbaric to him. "If her father manages to survive the war with his reputation intact, yes," Draco replied. "He's determined to marry her off as soon as she graduates." Harry's nose crunched up in disgust, and he made a mental note to keep an eye out for Mr. Parkinson on any future battlefields. "That's awful. None of our children are ever getting betrothed," he declared firmly. Draco gave him a fond smile. "Yes, dear," he agreed obediently, "though not all betrothals are bad. Millie's been betrothed to some German boy since they were 12. He goes to Durmstrang, and she's absolutely head over heels for the guy." Harry hadn't known that either. He really needed to get to know Draco's friends better. It was a bit tricky, with both girls still pretending to be loyal future Death Eaters. "Well, I'm glad for her, but we're not forcing our kids into anything they don't want," Harry said firmly. "Absolutely," Draco replied, his teasing tone vanishing. "Our children will be free to love whomever they please, or no one at all, if that's what they choose." He leaned in and planted another kiss on Harry's lips before pulling back with a smile. "All 12 of them, or however many we managed to gather." Harry laughed, and suddenly the blanket tangled around their legs as he rolled them over, pinning Draco to the futon, the stars completely forgotten. "I love you," he whispered, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. Draco smiled back, but then his expression shifted. "We can wait until I've finished my healer training, right?" he he asked, suddenly looking a bit wary. "I'm not sure I can handle fatherhood and that at the same time." Snickering, Harry nodded. "We can wait," he assured, stroking Draco's temple. "We'll have all the time in the world." With such a bright future ahead, Harry would do anything to make sure they could have it, no matter how many Dark Lords or controlling headmasters stood in his way. They should have seen it coming. It was the last day before school was set to return, and the occupants of Seren had gathered for one last family dinner. Kerry had outdone herself, cooking all of Harry and Draco's favourites. Even Snape was in good spirits, well, as much as Severus Snape ever expressed positive emotions, even in front of family. Then, before they could even get to dessert, a huge silver lynx burst through the wall. Harry jumped to his feet abruptly. That was Kingsley's Patronus. "The Ministry has fallen. We have Amelia at the den. Medical help required." The lynx conveyed the message. The tension in the room faded, leaving a horrified silence. Then Snape stood up. "I'll get my kit," he declared. "Charlie, Remus, I need you two with me." "I need to go to the manor," Narcissa said, frowning. "Draco, darling, you too. We may have some new arrivals, and I could use an extra wand." Draco nodded, following his mother without hesitation. "I'll head to Grimmauld. The Order will gather once they realize what's happened," Sirius decided. "Sorry, Kerry. Looks like the cake will have to wait." The house elf's ears drooped slightly. "Remus, I'm coming with you guys," Harry insisted, turning pleading eyes toward the werewolf. "I can't just sit here all alone. I can be useful." Kingsley had said "we," but he hadn't specified how many that included or how many were in need of medical care. Remus frowned at him, but then gave a short nod. "Fine. I don't have time to argue with you, but if there's any danger, you apparate back here, okay? I know you're capable of it." Harry nodded. He wasn't foolish. Snape didn't seem surprised to see Harry striding out of the house alongside them. He merely adjusted his satchel on his shoulder and disapparated as soon as he hit the ward boundary. Remus grabbed Harry for the trip. Harry had never actually been to the den. That was the name they used for Remus's cottage, though the werewolf hadn't lived there for quite some time. It served as a good stopping point for those who didn't know the secrets of Grimmauld or the pottery, and couldn't be trusted to go to Seren. Harry wasn't sure why they had chosen the den instead of Longbottom Manor. Susan would want to know her aunt was safe. His stomach churned as he hurried down the path behind Snape, uncertain about what they might find. Kingsley met them at the door, looking grim. "This way," he directed, heading straight into a cozy room. In the living room, Harry collided with Charlie as the dragon tamer abruptly halted in the doorway. "Percy." Wide-eyed, Harry peered past Charlie, and sure enough saw Percy Weasley lying on the floor, dangerously pale, clutching a blood-soaked rag to his side. Next to him, Amelia Bones lay unconscious, her face and neck marred by strange black marks that resembled veins. Snape cursed under his breath and rushed to Amelia's side, opening his satchel. Remus quickly joined him, ready for instructions, and Charlie snapped out of his shock, kneeling beside his brother. "What the hell happened?" Harry asked, glancing at Kingsley. The bald aura appeared relatively unharmed, although his robes were singed in several places, and a thin cut behind his left ear was slowly dripping blood. Harry gestured toward the wound, prompting Kingsley to grimace and heal himself. "No one was expecting it. I'm not exactly sure how it began. One minute I was in Amelia's office discussing Dementor sightings, and the next someone was running down the corridor shouting that the minister was dead and you-know-who was in the building. We were overrun by Death Eaters before we could even raise the wards." Kingsley's mouth twisted into a disgusted scowl. Tonks and I were the only Aurors actually fighting on behalf of the Ministry." "Where is Tonks?" Harry asked, his worry evident as he scanned the room, hoping the other Auror would appear. "She went to headquarters to rally the Order," Kingsley assured him. "There's little they can do now, but Dumbledore will suspect something if we don't report to him immediately. Tonks is fine, just a few bruises." Harry sighed in relief, turning his attention back to the scene on the floor. Whatever Snape was doing appeared to be working. The black veins had mostly receded, though Amelia remained unconscious as Snape waved his wand and murmured incantations, while Remus carefully administered potions to her. Percy's injury seemed like an easier fix. Charlie carefully directed his wand to knit the wound back together. "How did Percy end up with you?" Harry asked. He had picked up on a few cryptic comments from Charlie and Bill, suggesting that Percy's devotion to the Ministry wasn't as straightforward as it seemed, but he couldn't quite grasp how it led to this situation. "I was trying to escape the Death Eaters who killed the Minister," Percy piped up, "and I was trying to smuggle out some files at the same time. I bumped into Aura Shacklebolt and Madame Bones just as she was hit with whatever spell knocked her unconscious. I carried her so that Aura Shacklebolt and Tonks could keep fighting their way out." He spoke clinically, almost like he was delivering a report, but Harry could see the fear in his eyes. We didn't expect them. Minister Scrimgeour had just met with Augustus Rookwood. I knew he was a Death Eater, but I wasn't expecting this to happen. There was nothing I could do. I had to get the files out safely." "Why? To stop Scrimgeour from being exposed as a fraud after his death?" Kingsley asked sharply. Percy glared at him. "I couldn't care less about Scrimgeour. Those files are the only paper evidence we have of Dumbledore bribing Ministry officials," he retorted hotly. Harry wasn't the only one taken aback by that revelation. "Easy, Perce," Charlie soothed, squeezing his brother's shoulder. "It's all right. No one's going to hurt you here or turn you in. Bill and I can vouch for you." He glanced up at Kingsley, challenging him to argue. "And I bet Amelia would love to see those files of yours once she's awake." Percy looked mildly offended that his brother was on a first-name basis with Amelia Bones. Nonetheless, he reached into a pocket of his robe and pulled out a stack of shrunken files. "I hope I didn't bleed on them," he said. Percy fretted as he set the parchment aside to resize it. His hands shook violently, crumpling the paper. "They're in a shorthand form I created. I'll have to translate," he said, his voice tinged with anxiety. "You can do that later," Charlie replied with a scolding smile, ruffling Percy's short curls. "Once you've had some sleep. Hey, Harry, can you check if there's a blood replenisher in Severus's bag?" Harry hurried to kneel by the bag, digging through it for the familiar crimson potion, careful not to disturb Snape's actions. "Why did Severus come with you, anyway?" Kingsley asked, eyeing Snape as he finally lowered his wand and flexed his shoulders. "I thought you were all at home." Harry froze, catching Charlie's panicked gaze. "He's Draco's godfather," he blurted out, thinking quickly. "He came to have dinner before school starts back up." Kingsley frowned slightly, but nodded in understanding. "She will live," Snape declared, sitting back on his heels. "She will be weak for the next few days and should avoid doing too much magic. But she will live." Kingsley visibly relaxed. "Thank Merlin. We can't lose Amelia, not after losing Scrimgeour too. Thank you, Severus." Snape simply nodded. "Mr. Weasley, do you have any other injuries?" Under Snape's intense gaze, Percy became like a deer in headlights, but managed to shake his head. No, sir." "Good." The potions master rose to his feet, picking up his satchel. "I should get to headquarters.
Albus will want to know why I was not informed of this development," he said with a sneer, casting a quick glance at Remus that spoke volumes before he squeezed past Kingsley and left the room. Harry's mind was racing, and something clicked into place. "I didn't feel it," he realized, his heart sinking. "This whole time, I didn't have a vision or anything, and I can't feel his emotions." Voldemort would be pleased, perhaps even happier than he was. When he had broken his most loyal follower out of Azkaban, Harry expected to feel a rush of triumph. Yet there was nothing. No overwhelming sense of victory in his chest, not even a hint of satisfaction. His scar didn't ache, his head wasn't pounding, and his vision wasn't blurring as if he were about to slip into a vision. It was all eerily quiet. "Perhaps he's finally started blocking you," Remus suggested, his mouth a thin line. "You haven't had any sort of vision in a while, have you?" Thinking back, Harry realized Remus was right. It had been at least a week since his last vision. In his determination to prepare for school's return, he hadn't noticed the absence, only grateful for the decent sleep he'd been getting. What does that mean?" Harry asked, feeling helpless. Voldemort had known about their connection since he had used a false vision to lure Harry to the Ministry. Had it taken him this long to realize that Harry could see into his mind, even when uninvited? Was he now using the same methods as Harry to keep his side of the connection closed? Did he understand what the connection meant? "It means I need to call Bill," Charlie declared, his blue eyes daring Harry to argue. "We're taking you to Gringotts. Tonight." Harry opened his mouth to protest, but the words quickly died on his lips. If Voldemort was going to block him out so completely, what was the use of maintaining the link? "Charlie's right, cub," Remus said, squeezing Harry's shoulder. "If he knows how to block you, he might figure out the rest. We can't have that. It's best to cut the link now to avoid the risk." He looked at Harry knowingly. "You wouldn't be able to help anyone anyway if he's blocking you out. The only things you'll see are what he wants you to see." Harry's shoulders slumped. They were right, and he knew it, but it still felt like a failure to admit it. His visions had been the one thing that made him feel like he wasn't completely useless in this fight, tucked away behind the wards of Seren. "I'm not going to—" "Ask what you're talking about," Kingsley interjected, a slight frown crossing his face. "It's not my business, but if you need to speak with Bill, you'd better move quickly. Merlin only knows what Albus will demand of the Order in light of all this." Charlie nodded and turned to Percy. "Perce, do you have somewhere safe to go?" "I have my flat," Percy began, but Charlie shook his head firmly. "You live alone. That won't work for me, kid. Come on, you can crash with Bill and Fleur for the night." With that, Charlie pulled his younger brother to his feet, and they left the living room. Moments later, Harry heard the whoosh of the Floo. Silence settled in the room until Kingsley let out a long sigh, sinking into a nearby armchair. "Well, I think it's safe to say I won't be going into work tomorrow," he remarked. Harry couldn't help but snort, even as a knot of fear twisted in his stomach. Voldemort had finally gained control of the Ministry. Where did they go from here? It wasn't long before Charlie returned with Bill, both of them wearing grim expressions. They had left Percy in Fleur's care, it seemed. Harry expected Remus to follow, but the werewolf shook his head. "I'm going to get Amelia back to Longbottom Manor," he explained, carefully lifting the unconscious woman. "I can explain everything to Susan and Augusta so they know how to look after her." He met Charlie's gaze, his eyes serious. "Be careful out there. Bring him home as soon as you can. I'll let Sirius know where you've gone." Charlie nodded, his hand settling on Harry's shoulder.
"We'll keep him safe, Moony," he promised.
"I'll keep both of them safe," Bill added with a small grin.
"Come on then, kids."
After bidding goodbye to Kingsley and Remus, Harry followed Bill and Charlie through the flue. They arrived in an area of Gringotts Harry had never seen before, a bustling office filled with goblins and humans alike. As they entered the bustling Gringotts office, a few goblins raised their eyebrows, and one hurried over. "It's time for the ritual?" he asked, his voice gravelly. Bill nodded. "As soon as possible. I'll get him prepped." The word prepped sent a jolt of alarm through Harry. He was led down a narrow corridor and into a small room that contained nothing but a single metal wardrobe. Bill opened the wardrobe and pulled out a sleeveless grey robe. "Put this on," he urged. "Take everything else off, even your pants and your glasses. We won't look." He winked, and both he and Charlie made a show of covering their eyes and turning away. Despite the seriousness of the moment, Harry snorted. His heart raced as he fumbled with the buttons of his shirt, but soon he stood in nothing but the robe, his clothes in a pile on the floor. Bill nodded in approval and rummaged through the cupboard again, emerging with a small clay pot. "Okay, now stand still, this might burn a bit." With that ominous warning, Bill began to apply some kind of ointment to Harry's face. It tingled, reminiscent of the muscle balm he sometimes used after Quidditch, but the sensation was manageable. It took him a moment to realize that Bill was drawing runes on him, rather than just randomly applying the substance. Harry tried not to twitch, determined not to smudge anything. Bill carefully drew runes across his face and arms, then nodded again. "Good. Okay, you're ready. But I'm going to need you to trust Charlie to look after your wand for a bit." Harry's stomach lurched at the thought of surrendering his wand, especially with Death Eaters having just taken control of the ministry. "I'm sorry, but it'll interfere with the ritual," Bill explained, his crystal blue eyes filled with sympathy. "I'll be there the whole time. I won't let anything happen to you. Besides," he added with a smirk, "from what I've heard, you hardly need that wand to do damage." He had a point. Harry squared his shoulders. Harry took a deep breath and relaxed his shoulders before handing his wand to Charlie, who accepted it gently. "I'll keep it safe," Charlie promised, tucking it securely into his breast pocket. Just then there was a knock on the door. Bill opened it to reveal a stern-faced goblin, who took one look at Harry and nodded. It was time for the ritual. The Gringotts ritual room hummed with magic. Harry could feel the energy dance along his skin, the crystals embedded in the stone walls glowing with an ethereal light, which made the polished stone floor glitter in a riot of colours. It was beautiful, but Harry struggled to focus, not just because he had left his glasses behind in the other room. In the centre of the room, a group of people gathered around a ritual circle drawn on the ground. It was too blurry for him to see the details, but he guessed it resembled the circle he had discovered in Salazar's library, or at least was based on it. Bill guided him to the centre, where two more humans stood alongside a goblin. "Harry, all we need you to do is sit down in this spot," Bill instructed, helping him into position. "Hands on the floor. There you go. Perfect. You don't have to do anything to participate in the ritual. Just sit still and let us do the work. If it feels like it's trying to latch on, just give it a bit of a shove for us, okay?" His jovial tone couldn't quite mask the worry underneath, but Harry pretended not to notice, flashing a grin back at him. "Will do." He hoped that after all his meditation and practice recognizing foreign magic due to Dumbledore's lessons, he would be able to feel the Horcrux and assist it on its way out. Suddenly, he heard a quiet squeaking noise and craned his neck to see one of the other humans in the room bringing in something that looked like a small metal box. The squeaking grew louder, and Harry realized in horror that there was some kind of animal inside. Harry could feel the presence of a rat, or something similar, lurking in the atmosphere. The ritual had outlined the process of transferring the Horcrux from one living host to another. "Are you ready, Harry?" Bill called out. Harry tensed and gave a hesitant nod. Butterflies swarmed wildly in his stomach, but he swallowed them down with determination. He would be fine. Bill was confident this would work. Suddenly the room filled with murmurs of an unfamiliar language, and the ambient magic seemed to sharpen, centering on Harry. He took a deep breath, trying to sink into the best meditation he could muster in such a nerve-wracking situation, ensuring he didn't resist the magic as it washed over him. It felt like ants crawling beneath his skin, converging on his scar with an unbearable itching sensation. But Harry had endured worse, and Bill had instructed him not to move. The chanting of the curse-breakers grew louder, and the sensation intensified. Harry gritted his teeth against the urge to cry out, as he felt something beginning to tear inside his skull. Bill had warned him that the magic would try to latch on. The Horcrux had been in place for almost 15 years, and it wouldn't give up without a fight. But Harry was ready, and he was stronger than this pathetic fragment of Voldemort's soul. He gathered his own magic, pushing it alongside the ritual magic, forcing the soul out of his body. He could hear screaming, his own perhaps, or maybe it was the Horcrux's, and then a blinding wave of pain crashed over him, as if his head were about to split in two. And then silence. Harry sucked in a sharp breath and blinked his eyes open. He didn't dare move, unsure if the ritual was truly over. He could hear footsteps and the rat in the cage screeching in a frenzy. Suddenly, someone slid his glasses onto his face, and the world came into focus. Bill stood in front of him, grinning, sweat glistening on his brow. "Hey, kid, how are you feeling?" "My head hurts," Harry replied. Harry's voice was raspy, perhaps from the screams he couldn't quite remember. Bill chuckled softly, helping him to his feet and steadying him as he wobbled, nearly losing his balance. "Yeah, sorry about that. You can take a potion when you get home. That should help. Hey, just stand still for a second, okay?" Bill moved away, and Harry planted his feet firmly while the redhead checked him over with his wand. A broad smile broke across Bill's face. "It's gone," he confirmed. "No trace of it left." He turned to one of his co-workers, calling out something in what sounded like Arabic. An older man with a salt and pepper beard approached and scanned Harry again. The man frowned as he performed another set of spells before giving a decisive nod. "No foreign magic," he said, speaking in English for Harry's benefit. "The Horcrux has vanished, and as far as I can see, it hasn't left any damage behind." "Bill, you will monitor his progress, yes?" "I'll do my best while he's at Hogwarts," Bill replied, stepping in to sling an arm around Harry's shoulders once more. That seemed to satisfy his co-worker, who nodded and went to help the rest of the team clear up. "Snape can help with monitoring," Harry suggested, "if there are any specific spells you need to use or anything." "I'll get in touch with him about it," Bill confirmed. "We're not really worried, but since none of us have done this before, it'll just be to make sure there are no lingering effects on your magic. It was part of you for a long time, after all." He squeezed Harry's shoulder as he noticed the alarmed look on the teen's face. "Don't worry. Magic is resilient. Your magic especially. You've got a strong core. I'm sure it'll fill the gap in no time." Bill turned, guiding Harry to the side where someone had set up a metal cage. Inside was indeed a rat, a large grey one, its beady eyes fixed on Harry as its tiny body heaved with panicked breaths. "Guess we just need to dispose of this little bugger, and then it's another step forward," Bill said with a hint of amusement. "That's one off the list," Bill said, glancing at Harry. "Any preferences?" "As long as it's definitely dead, I don't care," Harry replied, eager to see it gone. "Fair enough. Step back then. Might as well make sure it's done properly." Harry complied, and Bill raised his wand, his blue eyes narrowed in concentration. The rat stared back, as if it sensed what was about to happen. "Fiend fire!" Charlie and Harry arrived at the edge of the wards surrounding Seren, and immediately Sirius lunged forward, wrapping them both in a tight hug. "How did it go? Are you okay?" he asked urgently, pushing back Harry's hair to examine his forehead. The scar looked fresh and raw, reminiscent of after one of his visions, but Bill had assured him that the wound would likely heal now that the dark magic was gone. Harry knew he'd have to keep a glamour up if he didn't want Dumbledore to find out what he'd done. "I'm fine. It's gone," Harry confirmed, leaning into his godfather's comforting touch. Merlin, he was exhausted. "How are things at the Ministry?" "Fucked, but there's nothing we can do about it," Sirius replied with a grimace, his arm slipping around Harry's waist to guide him back toward the house. "He's claimed the building, so anyone who works there will either follow orders or just not return." "What do we do now?" Fear gripped Harry's chest. If Voldemort had taken the Ministry, would it even be safe to go back to Hogwarts? "We get you to school tomorrow, because as much as I hate Dumbledore, that snake-faced bastard won't touch you if you're in the castle." "What about everyone else?" Harry pressed, thinking of the Ministry workers who didn't support Voldemort. Sirius's expression turned grim. "We'll worry about that later." As they stepped inside the house, Draco was right at Harry's side, his grey eyes filled with concern. "I'm fine," Harry assured him, stepping out of his godfather's embrace and into Draco's. "I'm just tired. The ritual took a lot out of me." Even his magic felt drained, though he wasn't sure how that was even possible. "Go on up to bed, cub," Remus urged. Harry hadn't even realized the werewolf was there. He looked up, blinking, to find the entire household gathered in the entrance hall, staring at him with varying degrees of concern. "It's late, and you've got to go to school tomorrow." Harry chuckled softly. It was hard to imagine something as mundane as riding the Hogwarts Express when the Dark Lord had just stormed the Ministry. For once he trusted the adults when they said there was nothing he could do. And he was tired. "Okay, I'll see you all in the morning." "Come on, Scarhead," Draco murmured, helping him towards the stairs. Harry grinned. "You'll have to think of something else to call me when this heals," he retorted playfully, and Draco rolled his eyes. "I'm sure I can think of something." He walked with Harry to the Gryffindor bedroom, deftly unbuttoning Harry's shirt and gently easing it off his shoulders. Whatever the substance was that Bill had used to draw runes on him had disappeared by the end of the ritual. Harry let Draco undress him and crawled into bed, watching as the blonde stripped down to his underwear and shuffled in beside him. "We won't be able to do this when we get back to school," Draco sighed, leaning in for a kiss. Harry hummed sadly. That was the worst part about returning to school, in his opinion. He'd grown far too accustomed to having Draco around to cuddle all the time. After taking a headache reliever, followed by a tooth-cleaning charm and half a glass of water, Harry sank back against the pillows with a relieved groan, snuggling into Draco's side. "I expected to feel it missing," he admitted quietly. Draco stroked his hair, humming softly. "Maybe you will, once the dust has settled," he replied. Harry murmured, "But maybe you weren't. It was never truly part of you, after all." Dry lips pressed gently against Harry's temple.
I'm just glad it's gone. I hated the thought of him having access to your mind. I hated even more having to watch you get pulled into his." Harry burrowed closer, wrapping himself around Draco so tightly that the blonde let out a soft laugh. "I just hope I don't regret it." No matter what Voldemort did next, there would always be a small part of Harry wondering if he could have stopped it, if he'd held on to the Horcrux just a little bit longer. But he couldn't allow himself to dwell on that, not if he wanted to keep his sanity. Whatever was coming would happen, and they would face it together as best as they could.